Welcome, everybody, and I guess it should, I've been asked to explain why there's so many of us. Recently, we had a planning board member run for selectman and succeed in getting elected. That created a vacancy. And then we had a planning board member resign, and thanked him for his good service, so we ended up with extra seats. But that's also an opportunity for us. The planning board can have two alternate members who have full voting rights if someone's absent, because we feel it's very important that we always have a quorum for every single agenda. So tonight we have all pistons firing, a complete board with our two alternates, so everything that happens here can move forward at another date. And thank you all for coming.
And this is one of the alternates.
Yeah.
There just was no room.
Don't take it personally.
Yeah, no, we're not gonna build a new town hall. We like this room, so we'll stay here. The first thing we need to do is have someone make a motion to accept the minutes from the January 28th meeting.
I make the motion.
Thank you, Michael.
Second.
All right. Any corrections? Any discussion?
Nope.
Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Thank you. That's good. Filings. Jen, there are no filings?
There are no filings.
Good news, we're moving right along. Next are the Form A plans. We have Armsbury Road, a retreat lot.
Cut me a check at some point.
I brought it, Joe.
Excellent.
Brought Tammy a couple checks. Was that for something different?
You can double check with her in the morning if you want.
It's up to you. I can do it right now.
Or if you, yeah, why don't you just come in the morning? All right, so the covenant is, on the retreat lot. The retreat lot is a lot west than the required 250 feet of frontage, but more than the, required acreage. So we'll pull that out. This is the retreat lot we're talking about. So the board approved that retreat lot, the 20-day appeal period is run with no appeal. So now the board actually needs to sign what is called the Form A plan, creating the lot. And the first thing they have to do is sign a covenant, which is right here, dated today's date. And the covenant says that the applicant will never divide the land. That it will stay just the way it is today. So if we have a motion to endorse the covenant, that's the first motion, and then the second motion would be to endorse the plan dated 2/6/19.
Someone wanna make that motion?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay, any discussion from anyone on the board?
Nope.
Any discussion from the public? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained.
And that was the covenant.
All right,
And then the plan is dated 2/6/19, a separate motion to endorse that plan.
someone make that motion?
I make that motion.
Thank you, Michael.
I'll second it.
All right, oh, fighting first, good. Any discussion?
Nope.
Any discussion from the public? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained.
Excellent.
So we have a retreat lot and we have one new lot.
So you have the covenant in front of you, and the plans are on my desk, so that we'll get those signed. Their signatures need to be notarized, so you'll need to pick them up tomorrow. Maybe you should come pick them up,
Okay.
because then you can ask Tammy if the fee's been paid. If it has, you're set. If not, you can give her the check.
Okay, sounds good to me. All right, thank you all very much.
We're all set.
We all
Oh,
have to
wait a
sign
minute,
it?
there was one thing that we wanted to, so you want to sit for just a second? We did get an email today that you have, Bob,
Oh.
from the abutter. Her
Yes.
comments have nothing to do with the approval tonight and don't affect this approval tonight. But she had spoken during the retreat lot hearing about the trees and the things along the road, and her concerns about the trees going, and the ones in the right of way, which we have control over, obviously.
It's from
She sent-
Nicole Patterson.
So if you just wanna
I'll read it into the
read
record,
that, just so
all right?
it's on the record.
I was out there and I roughly measured where the driveway will go along the street, and I attached a couple of pictures for your reference. The first picture is of a rubble stone wall. The second is a picture showing a 15-foot yellow tape measure showing the approximate location of the driveway. The third picture shows approximately 15 feet from our property line to where the driveway edge will start. It looks like only one relatively small tree will need to be removed along the driveways to go in the middle of 15 feet of the 50 feet of street frontage. We hope the planning board will request that the rest of the trees be left as they are now. What will happen with the stone wall, the plan indicates it belongs to the town. Rather than see it buried, we hope that the planning board will request that the rocks that need to be moved will be placed over the remaining stone wall to help rebuild it. We will not make it to the meeting tonight, thank you, if you need a more formal letter than this request. And then there's,
Right, so it's not a
It is.
scenic road, so the board doesn't have control over the stone walls, other than the fact that this stone wall would appear to be the dividing line between this lot and the town's right of way, so kind of owned by both parties. So, it wouldn't be out of line to say, hey, you know, when you gotta pick up some of those stones, just stack them on top of the rest of the stone wall. And then, and she just measured roughly to kind of where the approximate driveway was gonna be. I don't think we pinned that down, where the exact driveway is gonna be, but there's certainly, plenty of room, I think was her point, along the 50 feet of frontage, where you can bring a driveway in without taking down a major tree. So she was just calling that out, and the board can do with it as they may. Obviously, if any tree within the town's right-of-way were to be removed, that would have to come through a public shade tree hearing, so. So up to you if you wanna do anything with that, or if you just want it to be read into the record and the applicant on notice that, you know, if any trees are removed in the town's right-of-way, that has to go through a process. If they're below a certain size, and you would check that through my office, you've got some more leeway. And then stone walls that are a shared property line, it's usually the town's preference that if you're picking up stones to create a break and it's the shared property line, you just stack them on top of the rest of the wall.
Now, did you tell me that we'd probably have to meet with someone from the highway department?
that's what we did.
Someone
To do
to go
what?
over-
To-
Well, to cut the.
Send it down to Bill.
The curve cut. and
Yeah,
any
part of
tree
the
to-
curb cut,
Yeah,
that's always a smart idea, yeah.
yeah. I'd certainly be willing to do that, and if they had
Okay.
something that they'd like me to do that wasn't unreasonable, I'd certainly.
Anyone on the board
Mhm.
not fight
need to
anything.
weigh in?
I don't wanna cut any large trees that I don't need to.
Good.
Okay, no, I guess if no one from the board wants to weigh in, clearly, I guess from my seat, the scenic road
I wouldn't
bylaw.
cut a large tree if I didn't have to,
Yes, it costs money, yeah, that's fine.
unless it was very unhealthy looking, you know, I know there's a couple over there that aren't the healthiest looking trees, but I certainly don't see any in that area.
Right, and it is your property, this,
Well, that's the point, if it's not. If those trees are on or in the town's right-of-way, they can't touch them
Right.
without the permission of the town. Ones that are on their property, it'd be nice if they didn't pull them down, but we have zero say on that. Zero say on that. This is strictly trees on or in the town's right-of-way, which you have to have permission to take any of those trees. And I think my point was, you know, if they're tiny little saplings and stuff, that's no big deal. Once you get above a certain size, like a 6-inch tree, then you gotta meet with the tree warden, highway department. He's gotta make a determination on whether it's a hazard. If it's not a hazard and you wanna take it, you gotta through another hearing. So it's just best if you can to stay away from any significant tree removal. And then the stone wall, if it's a shared boundary, we have as much say as the applicant does of what happens to the stone walls that are part of that boundary that have to be removed. And it's usually the town's preference that, you know, they stay on the property, or even better, this is rubble, you can see it in the pictures, it's just rubble. So if you gotta remove this many of them to create the break, just stack them up on the rest of the wall. And just-
From my seat on the planning board, when anyone comes in and wants to do something with a scenic road,
Actually, you can-
stone wall, so they can back their Winnebago in, or I always say, yes, just leave the stones on the property someplace, and I don't tell you where to put them, just, it doesn't make sense to not let people, have access to their property, as long as the stones stay in town and don't get sold, to someone. That's the intent of the law. I'll leave those with you.
Yeah, and do you have the, does somebody have the email itself?
Yep. Right there. Right there. Yeah.
You can have that one too, that's the email.
Yeah, thanks.
Public record.
Okay,
All right,
Good?
you're good.
great,
Thank
thanks
you
for
all
coming
very
in. All right.
Okey dokey.
Next, we have villas at Pleasant Valley, Phase 2 cash bond release. And that's right here, poor Michael, you're sitting next to me.
Okay, so you have, action for phase 2, you have an action for phase 3 requested. Phase, 2, you have a letter from Graves Engineering, that basically says they're done. They're done with everything that was on the bond, they're done. So, this would be a release of the bond, which is the tri-party agreement with Middlesex Savings Bank. And then phase 3, you have a letter from Graves Engineering saying that estimate has been reduced from $467,000 down to $357,000. So that would be a motion to reduce that phase 3 bond, to that amount. So it's two separate motions.
Okay.
You have the applicant and the applicant's attorney here, have at least one trustee here. So, do as you will.
I'll have Michael read the release.
Okay.
And that'll be a motion.
Okay.
Actually, before that happens, the plans are ready to be submitted, the final as-bills, so they need to be stamped, right?
What do you mean?
The final plans issued to the board will need to be signed and stamped by a registered P or land surveyor or professional engineer.
Yeah,
They were done.
yeah.
They've
those
been
are all-
done?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah, the as-built you mean? Yes.
right, the final plans,
For phase 2, yes, those
Phase
are
2.
stamped and have been submitted.
okay.
So Michael, if you make a motion that basically says, I wanna make a motion to release,
Okay,
and just read to that, yeah.
okay.
Just that top part.
Yep, I want to make a motion to release surety agreement at book 47695, page 112. The Sutton Planning Board hereby releases the cash bond dated July 11th, 2011, between the town of Sutton and Blackbrook Realty Corporation relative to Phase 2 of the approved special permit plan entitled The Villas at Pleasant Valley. Said surety agreement having been recorded at the Worcester District Registry of Deeds.
That's enough,
Okay.
yeah. We'll get the rest.
Okay.
Don't need all those books and pages.
Need a
Okay.
second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion from the board? Any discussion from the public? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Okay. And then,
And the phase 3 is
phase 3,
the Fourth
don't go too
Amendment.
far. Right.
That will be the Fourth Amendment to that surety.
Do we all sign this?
Here, and we give you the original.
Yeah, everyone?
Yep, well, sitting members, and here's the minutes, by the way.
Okay,
So this needs to get signed by everyone too.
yeah. Go ahead.
Okay,
Okay, this is the fourth agreement to the surety agreement in book 56061, page 321. Sutton Planning Board hereby amends the Form K surety agreement dated September 26, 2016, between the town of Sutton, Blackbrook Realty Corporation, and Middlesex Savings Bank relative to Phase 3 of an approved special permit plan entitled The Villas at Pleasant Valley. Said surety agreement having been recorded at the Worcester District Registry of Deeds, Book 56061, page 231, and subsequently amended at Book 58006, page 351, Book 59484, page 245, and Book 59949, page 268. The agreement is amended as follows. As specified in the preamble, the amount of surety being held is hereby reduced from $467,000 to $357,000.
Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Any discussion?
Nope.
Any discussion from the public? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain.
Okay.
Good job. All right. Thank you. Jen, everyone here signs both of these, right?
City members, yeah.
Or you say city members, that's,
City yeah, you five.
that's fine. Okay,
You have a pen now.
Sorry.
got it. Okay, next is the Partridge Hill and Hunter's Court layout recommendations.
All right. Pull that up. So, Leland Hill Estates is, an affordable housing development, 25% affordable, and it is off Leland Hill Road. The zoning board of appeals issued that comprehensive permit approval quite a ways back, and the project has been built out. I believe all but one home is sold, and the roadways have been completed. And the applicant would like to move the two roadways, Partridge Hill Road and Hunter's Court, towards public road acceptance. The first step in that process was at the Board of Selectmen's last meeting. They voted their intention to lay out these roadways as public ways. And then they refer these to the planning board. The planning board then votes whether they recommend the roadways be laid out. Actually, the planning board doesn't have to vote anything. They send, the selectmen sends them to the planning board for a report. The report can be, yeah, it has nothing to do with us, we don't have any recommendation, blah, blah, blah. What we typically do is, I do the legwork behind the scenes to work with our engineer, the applicant's engineer, to make sure the layout plans are in accordance with the approved definitive plans and everything's accurate, which is what we've done. And then you would recommend that the Board of Selectmen lay out the roadways as shown on these plans. The plans are important because they show the meets and bounds of the right-of-way that the town will own if town meeting votes to accept the roadways. They also show the easements that the applicant will be giving to us to help us maintain the roadways and the related public infrastructure like sewer and water and the drainage. Okay, so, these are on 4 different plans. This plan up here shows a portion of Partridge Hill Road and all of Hunter's Court. And these are the ones that actually get recorded at the Registry of Deeds. This is the beginning of the roadway coming off Leland Hill, almost the full loop of Partridge Hill. And what was originally an emergency access road when this was a over 55 development originally, but now that is a 2-way roadway through the wetlands. This third set of plans shows all of that original entrance road, most of the loop. These have to be at a certain scale and detail, which is why they're on 4 different sheets. And that is the balance of the subdivision. So, all we need to do is vote the recommendation that these roads be laid out, roads and related easements be laid out as shown on these plans, which are dated 2/5/19. This will then go back memo, I'll send the Board of Selectmen a memo saying you recommended that they be laid out as shown on these plans. And at the beginning of March, this goes back to the selectmen, who then vote to lay them out. They go and file with the town clerk's office, and then it goes to town meeting for the residents to decide whether these should be public roads or not. Okay?
So Jen, these roads are built,
They're built. And there's people living on it, whole bunch, 56 families right now.
So I'll make a motion that we recommend the Board of Selectmen lay out these roads as shown on plans for Partridge Hill and Hunter's Court, dated or revised 11/21/18.
No, try, I think there's a more recent date, 2/5/19.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yep, 2/5.
Need a second?
Second.
Thank you.
So I take it that these drawings, these plans that have been drawn by Allen Engineering will be stamped by their land surveyor?
Yep.
Because they're the ones that have stated that they exist in this layout.
Yes.
Did we know, did we know that this, they were gonna try to make these public when they built them? Okay, I lost track, okay.
Yeah, like I said, you guys didn't actually approve this particular project. You approved an over 55 here a long time ago, and then that developer went bankrupt.
Yep. And that
So,
changed.
and then Mr. Burns picked it up, and then he turned it into this single-family development under a comprehensive permit, and that is always approved through the zoning board of appeals, or I shouldn't say always, often, most often. So that, this project was actually approved through them, all the bond reductions, everything's been going through the zoning board. But this is prescribed by law, that you make the recommendation on the roadway. I shouldn't say that you report to the selectmen on the roadway. There probably should be a clause in there, and or whoever actually approved the original comp permit, but that's not how it goes.
Any other comments from board members?
Well, because we've gone through all the bond reductions or, you know, tri-parties or whatever, we've had our inspector out there and everything's up to speed, built the way it should be, and there's no deficiencies that we're taking on as a town.
Right.
I asked for any input from the public. That's when we hear about the water from some, when the flooding. Is there anyone here that needs to weigh in? No, thank God. All right. So. In the past, we've approved things and then we own it and there's trouble, so I'm happy to see no public input. Then hearing that, I guess I'll call for a vote. All those in favor of recommending that the layout be accepted by the town,
Or be as shown on these plans.
as shown on these
Not
plans?
accepted. That's not up to us.
These plans. So, you made that motion.
I made the
Made a
motion.
I have a
A
motion,
second.
I
No
have the
discussion,
second.
okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained.
Voila.
Good job. Congratulations, thank you. All right.
All of those plans and stuff, I'll make sure get signed at the end of this meeting, and we'll see somebody tomorrow.
Pine Meadows, we have an architectural review.
All right, where's my time that'll forward? All right, we have several members of the Prime Metals team present. What they will be talking about tonight, there were three things scheduled, or two things scheduled. One of them is gonna get tabled, but then we're gonna add one on. All right, so, Prime Metals, as you know, was approved a while ago in the industrial park on this, what is now the second to last lot in the industrial park. There was original architectural plans with that project, and, you do have a copy of those original architecturals. I don't, actually have those things electronically.
That's the red, yep.
They would just like to make these revisions to what you see up on the board. There's really more color and material to some degree. So to that end, I'm gonna let the architect for the project introduce himself, and if you want, here. You can do that if you
Can I
like.
see the screen one? What's easier, the screen?
You can just tell me which one you wanna see and I'll flip.
That one's actually great. So nothing changed on the
Just
building.
introduce yourself
Oh, I'm
first.
sorry, Robert Elfers, Studio Troika, I'm a partner at Studio Troika Architects in Boston. So what happened on the building is we switched, if you remember, the original building was insulated metal panels. And some insulated metal panels have a set finish on them. We actually switched to precast concrete, which is a better material. So they're insulated precast panels. what they're gonna, and there's smooth concrete, so what that allows us to do is actually paint it, and actually break it up and give it some pattern to it. So the main difference that you're seeing here is everything in the building is exactly the same height, same windows, same floor plan, same parking, same site. The only difference really is that we can now paint it. So the ability to paint it means that we're able to break up the mass a little bit. So the primary difference is we use three colors, sort of a darker gray, a lighter gray, and if you remember, we have these sort of, you may or may not remember, these metal panels on the side. We actually made those kind of highlights. Instead of those, we actually have an orange piece in the entry. And we've sort of taken a band around the building. So here it goes to dark gray. There's a slight dark gray panel over there. That's really good. And then it shifts over here, oops, I don't want to break your screen, to an orange band over there. The corners become highlighted and broken up primarily here. So we're able to make it a little bit darker and break up that mass. So you zoom out and you squint a little bit. The building actually, hopefully your eye focuses on these parts, and the dark parts kind of blends away. So it's kind of breaking the building up into different masses. If you go to the other views, it's sort of the view of the corner, a little bit more detailed. View of the entry, works pretty much the same way as it did before, but now we can paint it. I think if you go to the next views, these are just sort of different views of the building that you have in your packets. So this is probably, and then you see in the elevation, so we break it up. And you stand, oops, sorry. Go, great, yeah, I love this. So basically, the other thing we're doing on the elevation is precast allows us to put these little reveals in it. So these reveals, these vertical stripes over here, they actually cast a shadow. So we'll have to put a little depth to it. So the building actually kind of breaks up its mass more and more with all these little movements. That's pretty much all that's changed on it. Any questions on the?
Just out of curiosity, does that panel have the same R value as the other?
We're actually
metallic
working
one?
with, it's a different way to do a building, so we're gonna be using something called the U-value performance method. So it's a different way to so instead of we use an energy consultant to calculate the mass of the building and the thermal value of it, so it'll meet all value of code.
So I think your general question though is that more energy efficient really than the old panel, or is it not can you
It's a
not do
better-
apples to?
It's a better building product, it's a more expensive way to do a building, so the developer is looking at it as a longer term, much longer term solution, because if you look at these concrete buildings, they're just gonna go on forever, so they can't get damaged by trucks, they're much more durable.
And the other was a metal panel.
Insulated metal
Metallic,
panels.
Insulated metal panel.
Correct,
Yeah.
yeah, you see them in a lot of buildings, you don't see this quite as much, it's not quite as common in the Northeast, but it's a more durable product.
The fire department will be happy. I mean, obviously for us, it's important that all the safety people look at this and say it's okay. Then I say it's okay, because you're talking about stuff I really don't know a lot about. But I you know, they get a chance to review it, and if they,
They're fine.
Of course.
and there's no, so that they know about the change.
Yep.
Anything else from any board members?
No.
Comments or criticisms?
When are you looking to get started on this?
That's a great question. Mark probably has a request to start
As soon as we
tomorrow.
can. We're going through the right motions at this point to make sure all the boards are understanding and satisfied of what we're doing. And then we'll meet with the building inspector, and then after our site walk, we'll schedule a pre-construction meeting and site walk. And once the limit of access to the building, the lot is approved, and the soil erosion SWIP plan has all been completed, then we'll put a bucket in the ground as soon as the building inspector says it's okay.
The long and short of that was tomorrow if he could.
Don't be
ASAP.
too greedy.
All right. Any comments from the public? Nick?
Robert Nundemarker, who's gonna own the property when you're done?
Scannell Properties,
Scannell?
Scannell Properties, yes.
Any other questions?
Alright.
Okay.
So we just need a motion to approve the architectural revision, or to agree that it's a minor revision. Haven't changed the building structure at all, you've really just changed the material and the coloring. So to agree that it's a minor revision and approve this change per the architectural plans dated 25/19.
Someone wanna make that motion?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you.
Second.
Any other comments from the board? Or from the public? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? Welcome aboard. Good luck.
Okay, that's all
Hope that
one.
moves it
We're
along.
not done with them yet. They're not done yet. Now, you'll recall, potentially recall, on the site plan, there was a very steep slope off the, or the subdivision plan, off the right-hand side of the roadway in the end. They will be transitioning that slope into an actual retaining wall. Some of the drawings are drawn on that, we're just finishing up some work on that, and then it's in review with the town's consulting engineer, so they'll be back at your next meeting for approval of that field change, basically, to take the slope and just put in a retaining wall instead of that slope. So, we're not talking about that tonight, other than that summary, we'll push that to the next one. The only last thing we need to take care of on this project is, when the subdivision was approved, we put a standard covenant in place. The covenant says you can't transfer land out of this subdivision, which you'll recall has 2 lots, the Prime Metals lot and an additional lot. You can't transfer those parcels until the roadway is done, or you put another form of surety in place to cover the cost of the roadway and any infrastructure within the roadway. And related drainage structures necessary to drain the roadway. So, they would love to get this property transferred this week. They have provided an estimate.
Excuse me.
Kill me. They have provided an estimate, and Graves Engineering has reviewed and confirmed the estimate. The estimate is $1,744,513. $744,513. You have a copy of that estimate. So, we just need a motion to accept surety in the amount of $1,744,513 in a form allowed by subdivision
You can
control
make that
law. So that could be an insurance bond,
Just
a
so you can
cash
make that
bond, or a tri-party agreement. So just a motion to that effect, and then I will prepare the paperwork, with the applicant tomorrow, and you'll just need to come sign that, the majority of you, in the next few days, and then that transfer can move ahead at the end of the week. And we can get some shovels in the ground.
I'd like to make a motion to accept the bond in the amount of $1,744,513, form allowed per the subcontrol law.
Thank you. Have a second? Any discussion from the board? From the public? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained. Buy the shovels. Don't put them in the ground yet. Get the shovels. See you in 2 weeks.
Oh, yeah, they did wanna give you a update on earth removal and kinda get some input from you on that really quick, sorry.
So we had an earth removal permit exemption dated, well, was that approved at your August 13th, 2018 meeting? And the application requests to remove 5,000 plus or minus cubic yards of earth from the site. Since then, we went back and forth and got more information, better geotech surveys and things like that. There may be more soils that have to leave the site, but when we say leave the site, as we talked about before, there's 2 parcels there. Anything that leaves the site is going to go to the neighboring parcel, so it's not leaving the area. So if they want to use the materials on a future date for their development. So it may not be 5,000, maybe a little bit more like.
Right, it's possibly 8,000, but just to confirm, to reiterate, it's not unsuitable material, it's unsuitable for a structural foundation. So it can be mixed with other materials to make it a better product, to backfill around slopes and drainage, all that type of stuff, but it can't be used to build a building on. And what it's gonna do is just truck right from that site to the next over, and it's gonna be left there until they reuse it.
So basically, the question is, you issued them an earth removal exemption, because this is an approved subdivision plan and an approved site plan. So you gave them an exemption in accordance with our earth removal regs, and, to move 5,000 cubic yards, there's a certain number of trips, a certain number of days. And now they're probably gonna be moving that less distance, just next door, which is good, but probably more. And so the number of trips and the number of days will change. So the question is, do you just want to kind of approve that in this meeting as an acceptable change? Do you want to schedule that on an agenda, because it was not scheduled on this agenda, and approve it then? Or do you actually want to, I don't know that there's a public hearing process for an exemption, but I guess you could do one if you wanted, because you're the board. So, it's certainly an increase in amount, but it's definitely less, since now it'll just be moving within the park where we weren't positive where it would be moving before. It's certainly less of a potential roadway kind of traffic impact than it could have been under the last exemption vote, so.
There'll be no trucks leaving the site. They'll all be self-contained on the site.
For the public and for the point of discussion, Sutton always had an earth removal board because we had such good gravel in Sutton. So thanks to Sutton, there's a Mass Pike, there's a Prudential Tower, and then all those things got built and all the gravel pits stopped being used. So we had an earth removal board that had, it met, but there was nothing on the agenda. 1 week, some months, it became years. And being the good board that we were, the town asked us to take over earth removal, which we knew nothing about, and said, well, we can be the earth removal board. So for some of us, that was brand new, so that required a site visit to Pine and to just find out what's going on. So there's a reason that we take it seriously when you weigh in on what, and so this is new to us, and I'll ask any board member that wants to weigh in at all to weigh in. So it's new for us, and then I'll weigh in at the end, but I'll ask for public input too.
So I did call up, just for your reference, the aerial of the two sites. You can see this was prior, an earth removal operation many, many moons ago. And this is a 2014 aerial of the area. So these two sites straddle that open area where the sand is. So you're basically gonna be shifting soil from the lower part of that large parcel to the upper part of that large parcel.
And so, just so I understand, originally the 5,000 yards was gonna maybe go off-site, or
Correct.
we really weren't sure. So this is actually, from an impact to community and traffic, this is an improvement?
Yes.
Absolutely.
So I would think that the current exemption stays in place with no modification.
Okay. Anyone else?
Who owns the land that the material is going on to? And what do they think about it?
That's an agreement between.
Don't tell them.
Norwood Group owns both parcels now. We're buying the southern portion hopefully this week. And there's an agreement already set in place with them to do this.
Thank you.
Comments, criticisms from the public? It makes perfect sense to me. It sounds like you've dotted all the i's and crossed all the t's. So do we need a motion, or do we just, I guess nothing else, I wanna thank you for coming in and letting us know what's going on as opposed to just doing it. It sets a high bar. We want businesses to be in Sutton to help with the residential tax rate. We do that by having responsible businessmen who show up at meetings and do things right.
Absolutely.
So we can hold other feet to the fire and say we tend to say yes, we just like to be informed.
Exactly.
I'll just note in the record that you're, because of reduction in traffic and general impact to the area, you're fine with the proposed change.
Yeah, it seems like all the truck traffic will stay on that parcel.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Okay,
good.
thank you.
Now you're good.
Thank you very much.
All right, we have some, oh, thanks, yeah.
Correspondence?
You have, two things under correspondence. Sue Rodnick
Yes.
has sent you an email You should have a short email and a longer email, and I'm just gonna let her kind of jump in and, tell you about what she's thinking, and then we'll go from there.
Hi, Sue. Welcome
Hi.
aboard.
Thank you.
All right.
So what I'm looking to see if the board would entertain adding to the use table, something in, Jen has been helping me a little bit with the wording, but, to the effect of an event destination. Basically what we're looking to do is use our property, continue to put money into maintaining and restoring. The next step really is the barn, but that is a significant financial risk for us. So if we were to do that, we're looking to see if the board would entertain adding a use that would then allow us to use that barn for things such as a wedding, such as showers, business events, something that could help to offset the restoration, if you will. So I went through the bylaws and looking at the parking. Everything would be on site. All parking would be on site. We would minimize the hours to be, Thursday through Sunday. I think my proposal was 9 o'clock on a Thursday night, maybe 11 o'clock on a weekend. It would not be all year. It would only be, a seasonal opportunity. But just really willing to have some dialogue with the board to see if there's something that you're open to, that we could discuss.
Thanks, Sue. I know where Sue lives, but I'm not sure if all board members do.
No.
So, yeah, so,
I do.
if you can describe it, we have the address here. What number Boston Road?
So we're number 440, so if you go down Boston Road towards the school and go past Hutchinson Road, we're just 2 houses past on the right on Boston Road.
So the existing, their, location is in the rural residential district. So, as with any, zoning change, you can't just add a use to one parcel. So, what the board has to consider is, do they think this use is okay and can be properly regulated anywhere within the rural residential district? This parcel, I think you said, Sue, is over 5 acres? Yes. Right, so that's one of the things Sue and I talked about briefly, is I asked her to look at kind of the bed and breakfast regulations, cause that's the same kind of thing, adding a specific use, but it would be allowed all through the R1, so you wanna try to pick regulations that would make it work and be safe, on any parcel within the within the R1 district. What Sue's talking about is obviously could be a little higher, I would say could be significantly higher impact than a bed and breakfast, so you gotta be a little more careful about how you word things and think about not only how it works on this parcel, which is what's driving the discussion, but kinda anywhere where you can picture, within the R1, which is 92% of the town. So, you can see, Sue thought about it over the weekend, took a look at the bed and breakfast bylaw, and kind of started the process of kind of drafting more detailed regulations about what this might look like. So what she's looking for you guys for is, what are your thoughts in general on the idea? Do you think it's something that would be appropriate in the rural residential as a whole with the right set of regulations? And if so, would you sponsor it, or does she need to submit a petition to town meeting? In terms of timing for May town meeting, all of the West Sutton Village articles that have been formulated on the side group over the last year, those are already drafted. They've already gone to council along with one housekeeping article. Those all have to be advertised this week for your March public hearing on proposed bylaw changes. And then the warrant actually closes for petitions the second week of March. I think it is, it might even be the first It's around the 10th of March. So, if you wanna sponsor something, you would kinda have to say, yeah, we think it's good to sponsor, and hope that I have enough time to work a sewer bill route out of my hat in the next 3 days, which is a little tight. Now granted, we do have time between now and the public hearing and even thereafter to kind of tweak things. But you want it substantially in the form that it's gonna go forward in, just for legality's sake. If you don't wanna sponsor it, if you don't think that's a planning thing, it buys Sue a little bit of time to work on it, but obviously, it's always easier to go with the planning board sponsorship. And in the end, obviously, it comes back to the public hearing in March, and you do have to make a recommendation on it at that point by law. So, what do you think about the idea in general? Is there things that you see and don't see in Sue's draft that you think need to be addressed, or things you wanna comment on in her draft? And then ultimately, is it something you would consider sponsoring, or, would you prefer she bring it by petition?
Thanks for coming in, Sue.
I didn't give you a copy.
I thought the magic number was 5 acres, regardless of the number of properties.
What do you mean?
So it wouldn't qualify as a spot zoning.
Oh, no, spot zoning, the magic number used to be 10, and now, believe it or not, the Attorney General's office tends to defer to the will of town meeting. Now, granted, if you, I have yet to see them pass just in static zoning, not overlay zoning, which we've talked about at length over the last 2 years. It's static zoning, like R1, those base zones. If you tried to put like B2 zoning here, so she could kind of do what she
Yeah.
wants anyways, if she tried to change this to B2, that would allow that use. Her parcel could probably be 20 acres, and I still think the Attorney General would whack it, because it's an island of static zoning,
Okay.
not overlay zoning, in a sea of R1. So I think that one would potentially get challenged. Though I'll have to say, nobody's tried it that I've heard of in the last 20 years. But the other ones that have gone to the AG have been getting approved, but they don't seem to be one standalone owner. And most of them seem to be a good 20, 30, 40, 50 acres.
Sue, thanks for coming in, and I appreciate you coming in. So I'll ask each board member if they have any comments at all, it'll be helpful. And I have no idea what people think, myself, and I'll weigh in. I'll ask people that are here if they have any comments, and that gives you some feedback. And then I'll ask, then we'll come back and see what the board feels we should be doing. Poor Miriam sitting on the end. What do you think?
Well, I'm reading this letter. I'd like to finish it.
Okay.
You can start at the other end.
Start at the other end. Did you read the letter, Bill?
I'm working on the
Oh.
letter too, but I don't wanna just reiterate what Jen said, but obviously, it's just a lot to digest, but if, you could always go through your own, petition it and put it in front of the town, and then the neighbors get the chance, and if it goes through there, God bless you. But, I'm still reading.
Okay. Kyle, did you get a chance to read it?
I'm reading over Bill's shoulder, Jen didn't give me a copy.
I thought I uploaded it, but apparently I only uploaded the first one. I apologize.
Michael?
Yeah, I was just reading it very quickly as well. I'm just not quite sure, this is your house or
It is.
barn that will be converted to have weddings? Is that what, am I?
So it is our property, it's where we live.
Okay.
We have a large barn on the property
Okay,
that, needs to be repaired, restored, or will just continue in its condition.
okay,
So if we were to invest the money to restore the barn, then we would look to use the barn. Currently, we don't use it other than, kids playing it.
right, okay, okay.
We don't put animals in there, it's not safe enough. to hold an animal, you know, a heavy animal or anything, so we just,
We let the kids play in there.
but we do let kids play.
Yeah, but they're light.
For myself, it's an interesting concept, obviously. The decisions that we make as a planning board have a ripple effect. It means that if you can do it, then anyone can do it, any place in town that has a similar circumstance. And then I start thinking about, I don't even know where other places everything is, but it does have a ripple effect, so our decision, we have to, and I think it'll be more than, for me, to make a decision tonight that I'd stand by and defend, won't happen, but, it's an interesting concept, and, it's a challenge for anyone that has a piece of property like yours to maintain it and to keep it and, not have it sold off, so we can put a road in and have some more houses, so we need to weigh
Right.
that, but at the same time, and I find myself, I guess, my initial comment is, I think you'll have a lot better luck, going before the town yourself than, having a board do it, cause the public sometimes think we're trying to do something, and that's clearly not the case, but by the time it gets to town meeting, we've seen people have some success, with doing things with their property when they do it individually, and they say, well, I'm nervous, I don't wanna stand up. It works well. If you hire a lawyer to speak for you, in Sutton, it doesn't fly well. Everyone gets suspicious and think you're up to something, so that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, and just to, further, my original thought was the village zoning, you know, as opposed to, you know, as we say, creating an island within the R1 district. But in my research, the village zoning really only, took the center.
Right.
You know, so that was the other thought is, you know, would there be any thought to expanding the village zoning a little further in some of these directions to grab some of these historic homes? I don't know, that was just, you know, another thought of kind of staying away from the R1, and I understand the hesitancy with that.
I think I share Bob's general opinion, and I just read this thing 15 minutes ago, and I would much prefer to have more time to think about it and the ramifications of this. When I make a decision here, and I've been on board now for 3 years, but I see things that we don't think about, we haven't thoroughly gone through. It seems on the surface like, you know, it's a good idea, good use, maintaining a historical structure and so forth and so on. But I'm not prepared at this point to make a decision on it as a planning board member.
I think I struggle with this, having done things like home businesses and bed and breakfast and the village and things like that, which is relatively low impact. If I look at this as a R1 district allowance, there could be a dozen properties that fit the bill. And if every weekend, 2 of them are having an event like this, then we have quite a different impact in the town of Sutton for traffic and activities. I would assume if I was having a wedding, that I would prefer to have alcohol on site. And I don't know how that gets addressed here, you know, I think, and I don't have a problem with that, but I think that other people might, so. I think this is a challenge for the board to support at this time, as I see it.
Thanks,
I agree with Wally with the time to like vet it out and understand it and its impacts and stuff. But in general, I like the idea, especially sympathizing with someone who's trying to keep an historic home well-maintained. Yeah, that's about it, I guess.
Okay. Anyone from the public?
I see this as a commercial entity in a residential district akin to the Dudley Jedron Post being there with weddings, alcohol, a a lot of people, a lot of cars in there. I think that's just really pushing it.
Okay.
That was Robert Newmark, 24 Singletary.
Anyone else? Sue, I'm glad you came in. And that's perfect, and for those people that watched that, all three of them, I mean, that's now wait and see what the reaction is, and
I didn't hear Mike, Kyle, or Bill say anything. I don't wanna put them on the spot, but did you guys have anything?
I think, at first glance, I think that I wish you the best of luck. Like I said, you can always pursue it yourself, and if you're able to, pass it through town meetings, that's great. But on the other hand, I'm not saying the alcohol, there's nothing wrong with alcohol, by the way.
here.
Not suggesting, no suggestions there. But, I'm thinking there's a noise factor and so on and so forth, and whether the optimal word is impact. But maybe some events are quieter than others or so on, but I would think, I don't know, it depends on the size of the event, it depends on the band, it depends on a lot of factors that go in there. And, whatever you envision or whatever what you could put there has a lot to go, has a lot to say with, I think, the impact that would feel in the entire neighborhood.
Go ahead, Kyle.
I share a lot of the same opinions as my board members beside me. I think it's just too quick to make a decision on this quickly, looking at all the factors.
That's why you ran for the seat. Michael?
I would just, as I think the others have also said, it seems like a lot to take in, and the ramifications, certainly to the neighbors would be an input, of what they feel about it. And also just looking at what this opens up for other properties is certainly something that seems like it would take a little more time than just looking at it right now. I mean, in itself, it seems like a nice use of rehabbing your building and keeping it as it is, but it seems like there's some outside factors that would, certainly neighbors in my first thought of just being sure they were, what their thoughts were, so.
Yeah, and that's all part of kind of drafting a bylaw is kind of, and we can, Sue, if you choose to proceed, we have a GIS system where you could say, where we could Google, I shouldn't say, sort the parcels relatively quickly and see how many parcels in the R1 district are 5 acres or more. So you can see visually, boom, immediately how many parcels and then how many over 10 or how, so you can at least sort that way so you know. And then, again, Sue did come in saying, hey, I was listening kind of peripherally to the village zoning discussion. Maybe we can do this, and hers is quite a ways down from the existing village district. And there certainly is, and again, this is something we can look at if you decide you wanna try to petition something for spring town meeting, before the beginning of March. That's overlay zoning, and overlay zoning is much more flexible in terms of spot zoning. So, I mean, I guess it's potential that you could look at. Now, or maybe you and one of your neighbors or something, we wanna be part of that village overlay zoning. The only thing right now is, as we discussed, this use is not allowed in the village overlay zoning right now. So not only would you be asking for some land area to be added in, you'd be asking to add this use in. And the current 4 parcels in the village zoning are small. It may be moot if you put a minimum parcel size, cause all 4 of those parcels would be undersized. So it may not matter. But that's something else if you decide to proceed, we could at least look at the things so you know exactly what kind of area you potentially be exposing to impact.
Okay. Yeah, and my original thought was the village zoning, just to be somewhat part of that. So.
Sue, thank you for coming in. Obviously, you know that we all pay taxes. So she works for us. She also works for you. I'd encourage you to, whatever direction you wanna move in, keep us in the loop. Smart to come in, get some feedback, but I guess the ball's in your court. All right. Any other questions for us?
No, I'll just continue to work with Jen.
Yeah. Big developers do it too. They come in to see which way the wind's blowing. So we just ask people to weigh in. Good. Thank you.
Thank you.
We also, can we skip the update from Wally? Because no one besides us wants to hear it.
To the
We'll
end of the
move.
meeting?
Well, it's 7:10.
Yeah,
Planning board time. We have a public hearing. There's people here. I apologize. Something happened to the clock. And there's a notice that needs to be read. Right. Yeah, go ahead. Poor guy that sits next to me.
Okay, Sutton Planning Board, public hearing notice, in accordance with the provisions of section of 4.c, site plan review, and section 6.0, large-scale solar photovoltaic of the, I don't know if I said that right.
Voltaic.
Voltaic,
You got
sorry.
it.
Of the Sutton zoning bylaw, the planning board will hold a public hearing on the application of Lumens Holdings 3 LLC of Short Hills, New Jersey. The applicant proposes to construct a 650 kilowatt rated ground-mounted solar electric generating facility on property owned by Deborah Hebert located at 49 Worcester Providence Turnpike.
Thank you.
Good evening, everybody.
Okay, good. No. You good? Okay.
So my name is Andre Joseph. I'm here with Omni Navitas. We're a solar developer based in Boston. We have about 100 megawatts of projects across Massachusetts, another 200 in New York. Probably our biggest, our most recognizable projects are ones that we're doing with the MBTA. We're doing about 30 megawatts of parking lot canopies with them. The first 3 went in this past summer. Those are at West Hingham, Nantasket Junction, and Norwood Center. Here, we're closing a 650 kW DC ground mounted system. We're working with Andrews Engineering on this, so I'll let Travis.
For the record, Travis Brown of Andrews Survey and Engineering. So this property address is 49 Worcester Providence Turnpike, located in the B2 zone, business highway. For those of you that may remember, this was a previously approved project with a different solar company about 3 years ago. So basically what we did was took the approved plan, tweaked a couple things, and refiled it under the new applicant. So those changes were changed locations of some utility poles and the pad location within the array. So those are the only things that change as far as the design. This is the existing site of J.D. Byrider Automotive Sales Building, which is shown here. There's a smaller building, a storage building in the back. The majority of this area is taken up of used cars, in addition to a portion of this area kind of on the northwest side of the building. So 146 would be here at the bottom of the page. Colonial Road would be here to the left. And northwest, or north would be pointed in this direction. So as I mentioned, this design basically stayed the same as the approved plan. We're meeting the 100-foot setback, solar setback here in the front, and the 50-foot setbacks in the back. So basically what we're doing is putting that fence, which will be a 6-foot chain link fence, black vinyl coated around this facility. Basically just inside that 50-foot setback. We'll be clearing slightly behind that. This area is actually open. Based on our previous discussions at those meetings, meeting on site with the butters, which may be new at this point, we put a row of trees in there, in addition to the screening that we have for the solar facility, which is a double row of eastern red cedars to provide screening. So this site generally, there's a high point here, comes down to this low point. So as these people would be looking at the facility, it would drop off kind of at a certain point where it would be going downhill. So that's what we have as far as design. We've received comments from Jen on this, as well as your peer review consultant, Graves Engineering. I'd be happy to go through those comments if you see fit one by one, or how do you like to handle that?
We have them here, so you can read them.
Sure.
Go ahead, sure.
Yeah.
Save Michael.
Yes, so the first, I won't read them verbatim in the
Yep.
essence of time, but we
Yep.
can run through them. So Jen's first comment was concerned with the survey measurements, basically on the GIS map. We've conducted a full survey of this property, so the measurements from the survey, the distances don't quite match the GIS, which is fairly common. So that was her first comment. The second comment was a couple of abutters. This abutter here and this abutter here. We've changed the name, updated that. Those are new owners from the last time we filed. Going down the list, E, so she wanted to know the use of these buildings. So on the revised plans that we submit, we'll put use. So there's 4 service bays here. There's an office portion of this facility, and then there's a storage building, which is a building behind the main facility. F, so this was concerns about the black vinyl coated fence. Jen, I think we had the entire fence as black vinyl coated.
Okay,
So I don't think there's portions that need to be black vinyl and portions that
I
don't
just
need
didn't
to
see the
be, so-
call out for black
Yep.
vinyl, so,
So I can,
no, that's okay, if it's there, I just.
yeah, so that'll
I'll
be
find
on the
it.
revised plan. So K pertains to basically earth removal. Previously, we had, I think, 4,500 cubic yards net cut. We regraded that to be basically a balanced site, so we have about 100 cubic yards. We don't anticipate any of this material going off-site, so we're cutting in more than we really needed to before. There's a couple piles on this site and then this low area, which will just kind of be smoothed out.
So on the cut and fill plan that you submitted, which is up above, the red I assume is cut, the blue is fill, is
That's
that
correct.
feet?
That is feet.
Okay, so you do have some, right near kind of that, in the setback area, you do have the biggest cuts right there.
Which there's a mound of material there, correct. So as you can see, based on the numbers, it's very, a couple feet of fill here, a couple feet of cut in general over the site, just to kind of smooth it out and blend it in.
Before you leave that mound, so the resident that lives on the road
Colonial
right
Road.
there, so when they look,
Number
when they look
6.
out, they see a mound of dirt,
That's right.
and that's gonna be cut
Currently.
down and leveled.
It'll be cut down on our side of the property, but that mound will still be there, so
They'll
that
leave
height
it on
will
that
still be
side.
the same, correct.
Okay.
So it's a pretty big cut, so you're just kind of grading it down, so you come from their property and then you got a 10-foot cut.
Yep, so basically you'll be on top of that hill, you'll cut down, blend that into where the fence is, and then it would be feathered in to where the actual array would
So
go.
they walk out the back of their yard, they can't fall and kill themselves, that'd be bad.
No, because theirs is actually higher, goes up to the knoll and then down on the back side of theirs.
Okay.
So they would be looking, basically, wouldn't be able to see the array, they'd be looking through that bank.
Okay. And I think that we'll cover some of that in the site distance
We will, yep.
things, okay.
So the next one was adding a note, leaving provisions to any plantings we have that we'll replace as soon as we did them. The next one under large-scale solar photovoltaic, we have some minor clearing within the 50-foot setback, so none of the array, no fences or any equipment is within that. In order to put that fence up to that 50-foot line, or 51 feet to be conservative, we'll need to cut a little bit in this area, in this corner, and down here, and then some of this area here as part of that. So that clearing would go in there. What's there for vegetation now is mostly deciduous. It doesn't provide screening. So what we intend to do with these larger trees will grow up to be more mature. We'll add that double row of red cedars here, which will provide a better visual screening for those abutters. The next comment is pertaining to fencing. Originally, we had shown a 7-foot high fence. We've reduced that to 6 foot. There's no need to go to 7. The next comment is sight lines. So since our submittal, we have provided some sight line plans.
So the one on the screen shows from where to where, but that's not the most important one. So they did site representations along all those lines. So now we'll go to the more illustrative one, which is sideways. Okay, great. So yeah, it might be easier to show them on yours, so if
Yep.
you could kind of.
Yeah, so I can go through them kind of one by one, but what we have done basically is taken a view from 146 looking into the site. So there's a pretty good slope off 146 up here, and then it kind of levels off at the top. And then what we did is we looked at each individual abutter's house basically from their backyard, basically what they would see if they were looking at the facility. So starting here, just transect line 1, so this would be the view looking from 146. So this red line would represent your line of sight, so where you're sitting in your car. This dashed line would represent the existing grade, so you can see this slope here, and then it flattens out, and then this would be the 100-foot setback. So which would be where our fence is. We have the staggered row of eastern red cedars to provide that screening. So as we look at these properties, we'll flip back to the report too much, but we'll continue kind of with each abutter as we go up Colonial Road. So this next one was what we were just talking about with that mound.
This
So
is
if
from
you're in
number
their
4
yard,
Colonial.
and you have this person here in their line of sight, they're looking into this mound, which is this existing part here. So you wouldn't actually see the facility from that perspective. The next transect line.
I'm sorry, what house was that?
This is
That was
number
number 4.
4.
Okay.
So then the next one would be number 6, Colonial. So basically from the edge of their tree line would be looking in. So there's some trees that would be left here in addition to the staggered row of eastern red cedars. So they're actually looking down a little bit because their elevation's up from the facility. Existing trees would be here, property line, some existing vegetation, and then the 50-foot setback line with some eastern red cedars on the backside of that fence that would provide some screening. So continuing up, number 10, Colonial Road. So there's not much existing vegetation in here now. So the tree line comes in like this, and this is part of their backyard. So what we originally had done was staggered some mature trees, some deciduous trees, and then in addition to those plantings that we have here, just transect line 4, so from their yard, fairly same elevation as the facility itself, so we have a proposed tree here, just inside the property line, in addition to those 2 staggered row of eastern red cedars on the backside of that fence. So number 12, same scenario, we plant that row of trees. We have the staggered row of eastern red cedars that look in, similar scenario to the one I just showed you.
Okay, this is the one that confuses me. So on number 12, so you've got the property owner, you've got the property line, you've got a new tree, and then you have existing tree line, proposed tree line.
Yeah.
Is
so-
that supposed to be reversed?
No.
Or
so-
there's no tree line in there?
No, there is. So what you're looking at is you're looking at the proposed tree that we're showing,
Right,
and then you have the existing tree line and proposed tree line, so there would actually be trees in here, which is this area right here. Which there'd be a strip of existing trees that wouldn't need to be cut as part of it.
new tree line, proposed tree line.
So
Okay.
the backside is gray, which represents the existing tree line.
Oh, okay.
And then the other
All
side
right, I
would be
gotcha.
what we're cutting. So it'd be a small swath, it's not very wide.
So it's like a strip of
Right.
whatever's in there between where you're clearing outside the fence
Yep.
and, where it was already cleared from the inside out.
Exactly.
Okay, all right.
So the next one would be 16 Colonial Road, which is this house here up in the corner. Again, they would be looking slightly uphill at this, so there'd be some existing vegetation, which there's a pretty good amount of that between here and our site that would be left. So again, we have this double row of eastern red cedars, and at the time, this abutter specifically requested to have a couple up in this corner to try to add some additional screening is what we had agreed upon. So that hasn't changed from the original approved plan. So that's the sight lines. Be happy to answer questions about those.
Any questions from the board?
The property setback, which is the front line, 146 is the front line,
Yep, this line here.
so it's 50 feet on the other borders.
It's, yeah, 100 in the front and then 50 feet here around this way.
Okay. Any questions from the public?
What,
Just
site plan
give it-
material?
Give us your name.
Al Carlson from 12 Colonial Road.
Oh, good, all right.
Looking at, you're talking about the eastern red cedars, what size are we talking? What size, plant material is going back in for, to help buffer?
Yeah, so the plant size that was approved was 4 to 6 feet. So the fence would be 6 feet. You know, they grow pretty quickly,
Yeah.
and fill in kind of like a hedge, so you
Yep.
wouldn't really be able to see.
What was the final elevation of the actual solar panel?
Final elevation, that
For the
solar,
top?
yeah, how high, Andre, off the ground is that
So those
roughly?
generally run about 4 to 5 feet tall.
Is that it? Cause,
Yeah.
I mean, I've driven by before and they seem to be above the fence line, so that's, was one of my concerns.
But yeah, I mean, the ones we've built so far have been about 4 to 5. Yeah.
Now, how about the trees too that were going in? We talking like 3-4 inch tree caliper or?
2.5, I believe, was the approved plan.
Okay.
What about coming up 146 and looking there?
Yep, so in front of this site, we have a double row of eastern red cedars in front of that fence that would screen any view into the site. So you have the existing building, which you can't see through, into the site. So as you get beyond that, we have provided that screening from 146.
Or if you were standing at the right front property corner and you look beside the building, it looks like you can see about half of those panels there.
Yep, so it, again, you'd be looking at the building until you get to here. If you looked real quick as you're driving, probably this would remain vegetated. There may be a small gap between that building and the existing vegetation to see, which we can look at. There is, however, an existing access up there, so unlikely we'd be able to screen that area.
Go ahead.
Question not related to the screen, the sidelines?
Sure, yeah.
Do you plan to execute a payment in lieu of taxes agreement with the town, or is this gonna be tax-free?
So we always look to negotiate a pilot with the town. I think right now the general rate that we're seeing is about 14,000 to 15,000 per megawatt. So if this is about half a megawatt, we're looking at about half that per year for 20 years.
You translate that?
Yeah.
The reason is that if you don't have a pilot, the present legal view is that these aren't tax exempt.
And therefore, I won't support it.
Yeah, if challenged,
Just
that
for-
is.
Well, right now you can get an exemption from paying
Yeah,
taxes for
if
solar
you-
panels,
yeah, if
and
you-
our land should not go for that.
Yeah, if you bucket, but there's already at least 10 pieces of legislation that have been filed to clean that up and block it.
What does pilot mean? It's an abbreviation for something?
Payment in lieu of taxes.
Got it. Okay. All
So
right.
you mentioned a value, what that pilot would be in terms of an annual fee, what was that?
So generally what we're modeling is about 14 to 15,000 per megawatt DC. So the
Per year.
system's
About half.
so about half. a 20-year contract, so it'll be that for 20 years.
What's the half?
So it's
Oh,
about
megawatt, okay, yeah, okay.
$7,000, $8,000 a year for 20 years.
Thanks for doing the math. I wish I sat next to you instead. Had a couple more hands, go ahead.
John Favalita Jr., 16 Colonial. Are you doing anything between my border and that beyond, like, into the property?
Back here?
Yes.
No, that will remain wooded. So that whole area, basically from that stone wall, I don't know if you're familiar with that stone wall, to about 30 to 35 feet.
Yeah.
Which is basically your property line as well. So that area would remain wooded.
Because I can see clearly into that lot from my deck right now.
Yep, which is why we had come up with this staggered screening and then also added some kind of at the point, at that corner for your view.
Your name for the record.
Yeah, John Fallagley, senior. A couple of things there. One is the noise that we're concerned with because of Colonial Road with the gas station being built and trees being taken down, where we're hearing a lot more traffic, the truck traffic. So we're concerned about that. I don't know if we ever thought about maybe a noise barrier along that stretch there of the property. We're gonna be removing all the trees and taking down some of that hill. And then the other thing is the fence there. I don't know why you decreased it from a 7 foot to a 6 foot. I think it should stay the 7 foot around there with the trees growing up there. I think it would be an additional safety barrier. But it's up to the board.
Yeah, the 6 foot requirement in the planning board regulation, to go to 7 feet, we would need a waiver, so, which is the reason that we've asked for.
We can consider that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, and the noise barrier, if they just address that, did you think of a noise barrier?
No, I mean, those screening trees, like I said, fill in pretty quickly, become basically a hedgerow. There's gonna be some level of noise protection, I guess, if you will, from that. I mean, it's 146, there's a lot of truck traffic, there's a lot of businesses on here. I mean, it's understandable that there's noise. A lot of this site is actually void of trees, kinda out front. In the back, there's more that we're cutting, but there's tree cutting as part of it too, so.
I think the growing though, that my son just mentioned there, I think that should be continued of the growth there. You did say that there was tree lines there, but it's very sparse, and I think they should continue on with the planting that you said you were gonna plant in that corner.
Further down?
Yes.
You mean extending down?
Yes.
This way towards the back? I mean, that area, I don't have an aerial here, but that area is all wooded currently, which will remain untouched as part of this project.
But the road curves that way, so that's meaning that from my property, they just bend around, so that's pretty much house is right behind that. As
Let's take a look.
Oh, good, Jen. I'm practicing.
All right, so do you want the pointer,
Sure.
Travis? What? Pass my germs to you.
Yeah, so we are clearing about 35 feet from our property line. So the house that we were mentioning is here. So you can see the lawn area kind of in the back of that house. So from this point here, so somewhere in this vicinity will remain wooded. So we bring those trees, those plantings around the corner, and then this area would remain wooded. So there's nothing beyond this point on our plan that we would touch. There's, said it's a mature forest currently.
So the sight line that you did for that property,
Yep.
did you pull that from like where their back porch is?
We're basically the edge of their lawn, so where they would be standing in their backyard, looking into the facility.
Okay. So So if they kind of scan their eyes sideways, like, so if they went like a, that arc.
Towards the back?
Yeah, it kind of, so would that arc be covered by what you've got for plantings there? It looks like it kind of would for the most part.
I think it would, yeah. I think we even extended it at one point based on those meetings before, but we felt that there wasn't any really need for that, seeing as that's wooded.
Well, I mean, the board does always put a condition to review the landscaping after. So, I mean, that's been called out as a specific issue, so,
And that may have been a condition in that approval, I'm not sure, because I think we were going to go back and
yeah,
evaluate
review
this
and make
after
sure the screening kind of was as intended. And there's no, the regulations doesn't say you won't see these installations, it says you'll buffer them to some degree. There's nothing that says you make them invisible, or any other development in the business highway or active districts. But we try to kind of reduce the impact a little bit with the regulations.
Assessor's office
What are you doing with all the trees you cut down?
and police department.
Three.
Jen, we have a, procedure is to ask all the other boards to weigh in. We've got responses from 3 departments. I'll ask Michael to read them in, read the comments. If you can read it.
Yep. This is, from the fire department. Knox padlock on gate or Knox box with gate key required for fire department emergency access. Is there one comment?
Everyone knows what a Knox box is? You don't?
No.
No, you don't? Okay, well then.
So basically what it is a lock on this gate which allows the fire department, which has a key to that lock, to get into it, to get the key to the facility, and get into the facility without anybody being
And
there.
the Knox box, per the commission on the last project, and pretty much every project we do, not only contains a key to get in, but it contains a list of all the emergency personnel, and in this case, should also contain an electrical schematic of this thing. Chances are, if that went up in smoke, the policy right now is, oh well, and they stand back and make sure all the abutters' houses are protected and your panels are going up in smoke. But they want that schematic just in case they can easily disconnect. Though the general rule of thumb is that they're not gonna touch it, that they'll call your people will be required to come and disconnect it, and they will just protect the property line with the houses in the meantime. So it has to contain electrical layout, emergency personnel, and the key to get in the gate.
The second one we have is from the collector's office, and they reported that the above party, Lumens Holdings, does not currently owe any taxes to the town of Sutton.
I get you on the agenda.
And the final one is from the police department, and their comment was okay. So,
Any other comments from the public? Go ahead.
How loud is it, that hum? Is there gonna be a hum to it?
It's not too loud.
Not too loud.
I don't think you can hear it over the traffic.
From what I've been told on these is like from 50 feet, it may be audible, but beyond that, it's inaudible to where you can't hear it.
Yeah, I mean, the one that's operational on Elkhurst Road, I don't think you even have to get to 50 before you don't hear the inverter. And you can't hear it at the lines at all, at the fence line. You can't hear the inverters at all.
Where does the noise come from? Does it come from each individual panel or?
No, it comes from the inverter box. It
Yeah.
doesn't come from the panels at all.
The
So
inverter-
any
How
sound
How many
is gonna,
inverters are in each one of these?
There's
Just one?
just there,
a single pad, yeah.
One,
Yeah.
okay.
yeah.
And is that, as soon as the sun goes down, does it stop the hum, or is it continuous?
So, once the sun goes down, it's not generating power, so that would go down. So, you can think of it like a computer room in an office, kinda like that. Like you'd have to be right up next to it to really hear it, you know?
So no.
Okay. Anyone on the board?
Can you just tell me the distance, or let the residents know the distance of that inverter, which is the primary cause of sound, to the property line? The closest property line.
200 feet.
So unless there's a really weird meteorological thing happening, they shouldn't be hearing that at all.
That's a prevailing wind comes the other way.
So Jen, we,
So.
went through pretty much everything and got all of our comments. My notes, reading this coming into the meeting, I thought that you might wanna continue to the 25th, to address some of those concerns that Jen, that you wrote off to make sure they were all on the plans. Is there anything else that we need to do? I'm not
No, they need to do some plan revisions based on my commentary, and I don't know if they had any left to do on Graves' commentary, but they at least need to do those things. And then we just need to make sure that our minimal draft conditions kind of take into account where they can any abutters' concerns. We already have the landscaping in there, that the board reserves the right to review the screening landscaping after it's installed to make sure it really achieves the purpose of creating some kind of visual break. Again, not invisibility, but at least some visual break. So that condition is already in there. And then, you know, with the testimony that you're not gonna hear the inverter at 50 feet, you know, other than there are meteorological anomalies, trust me, we've dealt with this at Atlas Fox and their fans that you hear every once in a while. But on a regular basis, you know, at 200 feet, the abutters really shouldn't be hearing the hum. So we can probably put a condition in there about noise, and then if there's sustained noise, that you need to figure out what's making that noise and take care of it. So we would wanna draft that condition as well. So I would just say, you know, cause we have a few outstanding comments that we probably wanna just, continue this to the 25th, make sure we've got a clean list of potential conditions, we've got a clean set of plans, and then take action at that point.
I have a question, cause we heard this quite a bit last year about, the local grid. I assume that, or you can provide evidence that the grid operator will take your power?
Yeah, so we've gone through the application process with National Grid. They owe us an impact study. We're expecting to receive that pretty shortly. Knowing the utilities, that could be another month, who knows?
Okay.
But we are going through the formal
You
process.
don't have it at this time?
Not yet.
Okay. You envision any problems with that?
No, at this point, no. Wouldn't have continued to move forward.
Wouldn't have gotten this far. Okay.
Okay. So, I need a motion to continue to the 25th, and you can help us with the time, but someone needs to make the motion first.
7:10.
So moved.
Oh. Got a second?
7:10 on the 25th.
7:10, that moved fast. Okay. Everyone on the board's fine with that?
Yes.
Thank you for coming. Thanks for all the input. We'll make sure they weigh in. Good
Who
to
was
see
the
you.
second? I'm sorry.
Have a good day.
Marion.
And that was a 500?
Absolutely.
Bob, that was a 500?
500.
Thank you.
All right. And 7:30 planning board time at 8:35. Damn, I'm doing good here.
Yeah,
We
we're a
have
little behind.
preliminary presentation on the Wedgewood Farm CCRC.
Yes.
Hi, what's the CCRC is a good question.
Wanna say it for a second?
Huh? Stop with that. Preliminary presentation, there's
It's a
nothing for me.
continued care retirement community.
Huh? Yeah, continued care retirement community. All right. You're gonna lose a board member for a minute. Good to see you. He'll set up.
I mean, that's on the state.
Sutton
Yeah,
building.
yeah.
Oh, yeah, that- yeah.
No, you can't.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if all of them were under that office, or if they were under different reasons. The state's fixing it, because they've made a big business of solar.
Where the place cleared
So
out,
there's
huh?
all kinds of legislation queuing.
Well, you've got a crowd here
Feel
now.
free to introduce yourself and jump on
Yeah.
in.
Okay, well, we just lost him.
Just for a minute. Be right
Oh,
back.
who did we lose?
Yeah.
Oh, Mike.
Yeah.
You abandoned us.
I won't let him talk on his cell phone, not during a meeting. I said, "We'll take-" tell him you'll call back.
Good evening.
Hi, welcome.
Good evening.
Thank you. My name is Randy Waterman. I'm with Compton Property Development, and we have two properties that are under agreement for development here in Sutton. They are both on Armsby Road. They are on the north and south sides of Armsby Road, former gravel pit areas that abut 146, on the west side of 146. We are planning to utilize those for a continued care retirement community, basically over age 55 housing. And so tonight, we're here just to introduce the project and ourselves, basically, and let you know what we're trying to accomplish. The project would need special permits under the CCR bylaw, as well as the Route 146 overlay district, and because it's in the, part of it is in the R1 district also. So essentially, sort of 3 special permits and site plan review, Conservation Commission approval. So, I don't know how long you wanna take at this point in time, but I can try and kinda quickly go through and you can yell if there's questions or whatever.
They're all yours.
Okay.
Get it to be done by midnight. That's all that we ask.
So I'll just walk you through, the existing site conditions first, and then, if there's any questions,
Do
you
you know what
stop me, and
this
then I have some proposed site plans and what we're trying to
went
do.
by and looked at
And then
that
I also have the building
Found it.
plans.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, I wanted to, make sure that everyone knows where it is. And Mike had trouble finding it.
Okay.
Do you know where it is, Kyle? All right.
So on the top of this map, north is up, but on the top of this map, this is Route 146 heading in a southerly direction. As you come down Route 146, there's a turn for Armsby Road. This is the exit right here for Armsby Road. Right here in the corner of the property is the sign for Pleasant Valley Country
Yep.
Club. You've probably seen that. So this is the very beginning of Armsby Road here as it heads off in a
Yeah,
westerly
okay.
direction.
I know right where it is now.
And just
so,
point to
yep,
where
I-
Enchanted Passage bookstore is.
Enchanted Passage
Yep.
is the bookstore right here in the corner of the property, so this is an out parcel that is not part of Locust.
Yep.
So Locust includes 2 pieces, the northerly piece, so this is Armsby Road, the northerly piece is this chunk of land here, that is 22.5 acres. And this part over on the west side of the property, you can see that brown area, that's all existing gravel, the surface. That area was excavated as a gravel pit years and years ago. The west side, or the east side of that property next to 146 is still wooded, but has beautiful sand and gravel throughout. There's a small isolated pond on the property, and then the wetland areas you can see here in darker green, and the perennial stream that heads off in a northerly direction towards Cold Spring Brook. There are no existing buildings on the property, but one of the abutters in the back, this is the Econo Lodge. They built a small section of pavement on the property and cleared some trees and leveled it for some reason. We're not totally sure why, because they already have a ton of parking back there. But they built onto this site, so Unibank, who is the owner of both properties, has already notified them that they need to vacate any of the improvements they've made.
Well.
Next to,
That's always a
again,
good letter
this
to
is
get.
looking in a northerly direction. West of this property, directly west of it, this is the Black Brook Realty property right here. The villas at Pleasant Valley, so their roadway comes in right here, and their condominium units are up on the hill. The next piece of property, this large parcel here, that's the Pleasant Valley Country Club. So again, this is Armsby Road, which bisects the 2 pieces, 22.5 acres on the north side. On the south side, this fairly rectangular piece that you see, this has frontage on Route 146, frontage along Armsby Road. This total acreage is about 35 acres. So there's a total of 57 acres here. You can see the areas that aren't green on the plan. This is the area that was removed for gravel years ago, so out at the front, right next to 146, along the edge of this wetland and pond, this area, this front area here was all removed for gravel. The good thing is that they left quite a bit of material on site, and they left the site fairly level in the areas where they worked. So they didn't dig all the way down to groundwater and create new wetland areas, but they actually left, in most cases, a minimum of 6 feet above groundwater. So there's still quite a good bit of good material in sight. The zoning line, you can see this dashed line that comes through here, then it follows the brook coming through here, then it cuts up to this corner. So heading east from there to 146, this whole area is in the business highway district. And then the area below that is located in the rural residential area here. From this line over, so a little bit of this parcel and or half of this site. The piece that is in the business district, since it abuts 146, is also in the Route 146 overlay district. So as we're looking at the CCRC, we would have a special permit for being in the highway business and a special permit for being in the overlay district, and a separate one for being in the rural district. But the CCRC is allowed in all three of those districts by special permit through the planning board. Several ponds on site, you can see those in the light blue. There's one up in the corner, gets drainage from the highway, comes onto the site, follows down through here. There's a 30-inch culvert here, another 30-inch culvert. Then it discharges to this little pocket and then eventually runs out into the stream that heads northerly off the site. There's not a lot of wetland boundary, bordering vegetated wetland on the south side. You can see a perimeter around this pond, a little bit here and a little in this corner. The biggest part is when you get down to that flat area on the north side of the property. That's where you get the widest, largest wetland area. Abutters, Enchanted Passage bookstore. There's a small chiropractic shop that I think was just reconstructed out on 146.
Yep.
The Econo Lodge is here. You get the condominiums that are being completed, or getting near completion, it looks like, for Pleasant Valley, the villas at Pleasant Valley. And then on this side, you've got about 10 homes that abut. So this is a Commonwealth of Mass parcel that's undeveloped. And then there's about 10 single-family homes that directly abut the piece. So the good thing is there's really not a lot of direct abutters. The condominiums that are built up here, there's a large wooded area. I'll show you on the aerial photo in just a minute, but there's a large wooded area between those homes and this property, and there's also a 70-foot elevation change. They sit up on a hill, and that hill slopes down to this property. So pretty good elevation change. And this little out parcel right here, that is the town of Sutton Cemetery. So that's it in a fairly quick nutshell. Just for general purposes, I brought an aerial photo, again, that being the north property. This is Armsby Road, this is the south parcel. You can see 146 a little better on this. So this is the southbound lane of 146, that's the northbound lane, and this is the actual ramp that comes off of 146 and goes back on it. So if you're coming from the north, you can come down to the project and then leave and come out and go right back onto 146 if you want to. And if you're heading from Providence up, you can get off at Central Turnpike, come down Central Turnpike to Burnap Road, out to Armsby and back to the project. The only structure really on this south side, you can see this kind of wide swath through the property. There's a Tenneco gas easement that crosses to the property. It's quite wide in some areas. Down in here, it's 160 feet wide because they have two separate gas lines in there. So one of them comes and runs on the north side, that strip there. The other one is on the south side that runs through this strip. So there's a large sort of divide in the property where we can't really do a lot of site work. We can't go through there and do a lot of cutting and filling. We can do a little bit with their permission, but not a lot. And then you've got this big buffer up in the back, which really, elevation-wise, from this grade at the street to the top of the hill is almost 100 feet in elevation. So again, it's very difficult to get any kind of a road up to the top. So really, we've looked at that as probably just a buffer to the neighbors, which works out well in this case because we've got the 10 homes. So if we do nothing in the back other than maybe a trail, we've got a pretty good buffer to the abutting homes. Let's see, I'll step to, this is, that first plan I did at 80 scale just because we had it left over from last week. We were in front of the Conservation Commission to get all the wetland boundaries approved. So I just kept that as it was. This is a smaller scale, so this is 100 scale now, a little smaller. North is still up on the plan. And so this is the northerly parcel. This is the southerly parcel here. So Route 146 south, and then this is the ramp that comes off Armsby Road here, and that's Enchanted Passage. So again, this would be a congregate care retirement, continued care retirement facility, 88 total units. And each unit, we've worked, I think, pretty closely with Jen so far on trying to think of what makes sense for the town of Sutton specifically, and what is a product that is, you know, sort of hot on the market and would, you know, look appropriate in town. I attended, I think back in September, I believe it was, one of your housing forums, and really a lot of the talk was about we need smaller, more affordable type units. There was a CCRC proposed on this southern lot back in '07 that had very large 3-story buildings,
Right.
big units, and everything was kind of monster scale.
Right.
We've really taken the opposite approach and said, let's get everything down to a small scale. So the boxes that you see on here each represent one of the units. The way the wetlands, that I just explained, the wetlands, the streams, and all the other slopes and the cuts and the fills, really break it up so there's 4 separate development areas on the property. This one is in the gravel pit that I showed you up on the northwest side of the site. This is in the gravel cut area down on the southern. This is the gravel opening area that's right next to the highway. And this is really the only area that was some of the remaining woodland that we have. But there's beautiful sand and gravel in there. And so it would be great to be able to try and utilize that on the property for road construction. One other point that I didn't mention on the existing conditions, both sections of Route 146 abutting this property are both no-access highways. So we are not able to bring a driveway on or off of Route 146 at these locations. So really our frontage and our access is gonna come off of Armsby Road. And that played in a little bit to the design of this project, because as you looked at it, you know, original thought was this is business zone. You can put hotels on this property in the business zone. So one idea was, well, if you just come off, you could get to this upland area here, come on and off this way or on and off this way, and you could do a hotel or some other, you know, larger scale commercial project. Well, you know, once you identify that you really can't have access on and off of 146, it didn't make as much sense to take these types of commercial uses and bring them onto Armsby Road, more of a residential street, and then bring the vehicles in and out of this business area. It didn't make a lot of sense. So when we went through the zoning and realized that this is allowed in all these districts, it made much more sense to have one cohesive project where it's all the same kind of use and it's more residential in nature. So that's kind of how we got from point A to point B. So going back to the units themselves, what we've come up with is a cottage style senior housing project. So each of these units are either a single, a double, or a triple. There's no quads, there's nothing bigger than that. They're all single units or double units or triple units, and each unit is 36 by 48 feet, 1.5 story. There's no 2-story buildings in the project. 1.5 story, so we keep them low, very Cape style looking architecture. Farm style, we've been calling them. Some of them have a small little porch in the front or in the back. They can kind of, you know, rotate them as we design the site, but they're really set up to be fairly flexible. They would be about 1,300 usable square feet on the first floor, and then the units that are going to be a 2-bedroom unit. They would have a small space upstairs where they'd have a 2nd bedroom, a 2nd bathroom, and a little storage space. All the units could have basements if people want. If people don't need them and don't want them, then they don't necessarily have to all have basements. They all have a 1st floor master. They all have 2-car garages. Something that marketing has been telling us you have to have in this market for active adults. Everybody wants a 2-car garage. So they're all right now designed fairly similar, but I'll show you the architecture that we've kind of worked through with members of the team. The roadways are all designed to be private roadways. So what we've done so far is we've tried to keep them, the look of them, fairly residential in nature. So the central driveways where we come off the street, in this section, and this beginning section, we made 24 feet wide with 1 foot wide Cape Cod berms. And in other areas where we get into these little shorter sections over here and over here, we went down to 22 feet. And that is based on discussions that we had at our department head meeting with Graves Engineering and with the fire and police chiefs. And in each location where we have a dead end, we've set it up so that the turning radius in here is set up so a fire truck can make a full turn in there. We did the same thing at this location. And then each of these are set up so you can make a full loop at the end. So we've shown that to the fire chief, and he's indicated that design is acceptable to him. So hopefully that will be acceptable to this board. But anywhere we don't meet your subdivision regs, obviously, we would have to, request waivers to change that. Let's see, I'll jump to, excuse me, the architecture a little bit, just so you can see kind of where we were headed so far. So this is Smoke Architecture, is a firm we've worked with in the past. They're very talented, do great graphics, do a lot of this type of work. What we did is we really sat down and thought about what should the footprint look like, what's the normal size of this footprint. So it's no bigger than it has to be, but it accommodates what the proposed use is. So again, this is what we're calling a farm-style cottage, basically a senior housing cottage unit. And the way this project is set up, there would be singles. And the single could either be, this is the 36-foot dimension term, so when you look at it from the street, you're looking at that 36-foot dimension. So again, the hard part is to have a 2-car garage on that 36 feet and still make it look nice. That's difficult. So we spent some time looking at different options with garage doors and way to hide the doors, and all of the units are set back a little bit from the front porch area, so we've kind of set that back. Tried to do different things with the roof line to try and make it look a little nicer. But that's the 36-foot dimension at the street. If the house is turned, so you can have the 48-foot dimension, you've got more to work with there. So you've still got the 2-car garage, but you've got a little more room to work and have some other accessories and a little dormer window up top, so you can break it up a little bit better. This is the side view, just so you can see what's proposed. Generally horizontal siding, asphalt style roofs, but we have some standing seam metal roof sections, just to try and break up the architecture and make it look a little more appropriate. So these are the single units. The way and down. This is the 2 and 3 units, so basically, again, we tried to take the sort of the worst looking part, the hardest to hide, was really the areas where you have all the garages on the front of the building. This isn't happening in all the cases. In many cases, when we have end units, we're gonna try and bring the driveway around the side so you don't see any garage doors, so you have a lot more to work with on the architecture. But this is sort of, you know, the worst case, so to speak, of architecturally, what it looks like aesthetically. So these are showing, you know, this is a double unit. We have both of the 2-car garages on the front of it. But in all cases on the site plan, you see we've broken them up, so we never put the 2 garages together. So you have a 16-foot door and 16-foot door next to each other. In most cases, what we try to do, and the site just works that way, that you can see each of these buildings are stepped. So generally on all the 3 units that we have on here, they're not all at the same elevation. They're almost always stepped 2 feet, just so you can break up, again, the architecture, the look of it, the roof lines, break those up a little bit. You know, we thought, you know, we've played with a fair amount on the architecture, but, you know, we've got some little detail on here to make it look a little more farm style. We have some gooseneck lighting that looks really nice, period lighting, and a simple porch out front, or deck out front. Just simple beams, and because it's so close to the ground, because we're trying to make this accessible as we can, we don't need railings, because it's only a 6-inch drop. So it just looks nicer, not having that clutter, makes it a little more affordable. So those are some features that are built into the architecture. We've been talking with Jen about needs for the town, and originally one of the discussions was it might make sense to have some single units instead of 2-bedroom units, and maybe some of those could be apartments. So we have shown on the plan of the 88 units, right now we show 9 of them to be single-car apartment style units. And so we have done some architecture to show you what that would look like. So essentially the concept is the same, the siding is the same, but it's a 1-car unit inside, and the 1 cars could be on the outside as well on the site plan. But it's all designed so the maximum height again would be 24 feet, but these would all be 1-bedroom, master on the first floor with 1-car garage, and these are set up as apartments. Because we're in the CCRC, we also need to have affordable, a 10% affordable component. So we've talked a little bit about, you know, the apartments are a little difficult when we have a homeowners association, we have owners for 79 of the units, but 9 of them are apartments, and so they're treated a little differently and they're a little harder to manage. So the one thought was maybe instead of having actual apartments, maybe we would have, a few more affordable units, and maybe a few more of these would become single bedroom condominiums for sale, like the rest of the units. So that way it'd be match a little better, it'd be easier to handle in the condominium documents, and I think in a way, a lot of the neighbors might be concerned if somebody's in an apartment, they're a renter versus they own, they're not gonna take care of things as well. So it's something that needs to be considered. So we're still trying to work through what is the correct formula that serves Sutton the best. The next plan we talked about, in order to just try and break up the architecture and have some options. So if somebody comes in and is looking at a unit, they've got sort of a little menu board to choose from. So we really like the kind of sliding barn doors, so we have a couple of those ideas. We wouldn't wanna put these on every unit, but we thought maybe as you pull into each of these 4 neighborhoods, maybe the first building you come to that's turned to the street sideways, maybe there's a way to add 1 or 2 of those, so as you pull in, it just gives it a little different feel. We like these pergolas over the doors, and we're thinking on the garages specifically to add a little pergola over that. It gives you a little shadow then, and sort of the doors set back so it's not jumping out at you, so you don't look at a unit and the first thing you see is the garage doors. There's just an idea of some of the gooseneck lighting that might be used, and some different ideas on some of the garage doors, sort of different, the way they could be shaped. Some of these brackets over the doors, and we showed like an option here where the roof line would actually come down a little bit just over the garage. So again, just to make it look like it's set back a little further, and it doesn't really look as substantial in the architecture. And then the one other thing I just wanted to mention was on the site plan. Again, this site, it's really a reuse, redevelopment of two former gravel pits. So because everything ended up being so broken up in the design, we thought that, we've been really working with the landscape architect to try and figure out how do you kind of pull it all together and make it make sense. So we want to develop a trail system that could wrap, and it's shown on here, it's a little hard to see the scale, but wraps around this part of the site. We're gonna ask the Conservation Commission to let us do a little bog bridge across this section. Then it could tie up here, back down here to this starting point, across the street, come around this site, all the way around here, back down to here, back down to this corner, and then back down. And right here in the center, we wanna have sort of a central park, which is sort of a requirement of the Route 146 overlay district, is that you have a central gathering spot, at least 5 acres of size. So really this, with the ponds and everything in here, beautiful wooded area, this is a section where we can make a trail in here that's actually accessible. So people could get out there in a wheelchair and be able to get around part of this site on a wheelchair. But what we would like to do is get people, if people have friends on each side of the street, how do you cross the street and where do you do it, and what's the most logical thing? So we have a terminus point for this trail right here, and another one for this whole trail right here. And our thought was, as you get out here to the street, what we could do is develop, and we called it just a rest stop for now, but this is something that as those 2 trails converge out to the street, on each side of the street, we could see a small little rest stop area just to meet. So if you're on one side of the street, you can say, hey, I'll meet you over at the rest stop and we'll go wherever. Or if you're dropping somebody off on the street, we have a little pull-off. And so it would be a great place that you could just drop somebody, they can walk in and not have to, you don't have to be driving in and out of the neighborhood all the time. But it'd be a great place if you're gonna go ride a bike, hey, I'll meet you up at the rest stop or whatever. We could have bike racks with it, signage opportunity for the development. So that's right out at, so that would be right at this location, a great spot to bring all the trails down to here, and all these trails could come out through the park to here, and then you'd have one of these little rest stops on each side, and we just have a little turnout for like a single car. Just a place to sort of drop people or pick people up. We're working closely on the landscape design. It's not complete yet, but hopefully will be by the end of this week, but we're really trying to develop little pocket parks at the back of each of these packages of units. And so every one of these units would face back on the park. And so these units on this street, we wouldn't see the little porches on the front side, and those most likely would be on the back side. So you could sit out back, and there's these units are 48 feet deep. We kept at least 40 feet between all these units, so there's a good strip in there where you could have nice little patios or porches out back, whichever you desire, and you're all backed up to this little landscape areas, these little pocket parks. You know, we could see probably a fire pit or two out here. There's a gathering place for all the neighbors, but a place that's, you know, a really nice place to hang out. The alternative, if we just have a single street that comes up the middle, we can shorten the road, but then all the open space is really private open space, versus this way, it's public open space for all the people to use. So there's a little pocket park here, another one here, smaller one here, really kind of private in the back of these, another pocket park in here, and a little one in here, really, you know, mostly just for the benefit of those people. But at least this way, you know, you can hang out back here, you'd have landscaping, some lighting, there'd be trails that walk all the way through the entire project, and these areas would get nicer landscaping, obviously, and dressed up. A lot of the other part could be just greenscape, and you see a lot of the trails is just crushed stone, so it's not, you know, impervious. The buildings, the way it's designed right now, the 88 units cover about 3.5 acres. The roads is almost a mile of road on this entire site, so that covers about 3 acres. So there's about 6.5 to 7 acres of impervious on this plan. 57 acres, that leaves about 50 acres of open space. So like 85% or something, 88% of the entire project would be left as open space, and that would be permanently protected through the homeowners association. I think what else, we've met with the Wilkinsonville Water District. They've given us a letter that they have created some capacity and some improvements they've made, so they would be able to serve the project, so we have that in hand. We would be doing on-site septic systems because it is a sand and gravel site. So we've identified an area at this point, so all of these units would come right to this spot, very short run. All of these units would go right to this spot right here. And these units would flow right down here to this spot right here, and those units would go to the same spot. So really 3 septic systems to serve all of the units on site. We're talking to John Byrne, I just saw him a minute ago, met with him a week ago, so we're talking to them about tying into their gas system, which is through Eversource at the villas, and extending that down. So that's in discussion, but I don't have any approval of that yet, but that's the plan. Otherwise, we'd have to go to propane, which isn't ideal, but it's still a good service. So again, we're kind of buttoning the plans. I'm trying to get things filed, but wanted to come in at least have a chance to show you what we're trying to accomplish. And obviously, there'd be 3 special permits, site plan review, notice of intent, so there's a long road to go, but that's where we are so far.
I forgot your first name, I'm sorry.
Randy.
Randy, thank you very much for coming in.
Yep.
I assume, in I's presentation, I assume you wanna hear any comments that
Absolutely.
board members might have, or any thoughts,
Yep.
and then, you know, we don't have a big audience, but I'll ask people to weigh in, and obviously for the new board members.
Yep.
Someone who's doing a project is smart to come in, and just throw it out here to get the reaction from all of us.
Absolutely.
Yeah, ask everyone to weigh in. Bill, you mind? Give us your 2 cents worth.
Jen, what is this, I see you, what's the type of housing, the village housing?
Cottage housing?
Cottage housing, is this a cottage housing?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like that, yeah, it's, I mean, we were gonna propose the cottage housing bylaw, that hasn't been proposed yet, but you see some of that flavor in this project. Cottage housing would not be age restricted. But yeah, this is kind of that cottage housing setup, both in kind of the way these pods like this one are laid out to that central green space. And that's kind of a cottage housing layout. And the architectural design, one of the models we gave Randy to use to kind of start with was the Heritage Sands cottage development in West Venice on the Cape. And they've done a good job of kind of tweaking that. Randy and I did talk about maybe not everything the same color, you know, kind of mixing up the colors, but, cause that adds depth as well, but.
Yeah, I talked to the architect just on that exact point, and they sort of like the idea of most of it being white, but they went back and they added some, and it doesn't show as well on this, but these are board and bat and vertical siding, and then they've got some gray, different colors of gray, so they're like 3 colors of gray, and sort of offset them and then changing doors. But they were like, you know, I don't think I don't wanna see the yellow ones or orange ones or blue, so they're like, the white actually works, but we're open to.
Need some yellow and orange and blue. We're all white with like a stripe of whatever color you like for your unit. But, yeah, so this is very reminiscent, or kind of a model when we age restricted of what cottage housing would kind of feel like as well in terms of that clustering.
And how many square feet is the individual units? 17?
These are, they're 1,300 square feet usable on the first floor, not counting the garage.
Okay.
And if somebody wanted a 2-bedroom unit, then that would be on the upper level, and that's about 400 square feet for a bedroom, bathroom, and storage, so 17.
And the density passed all the regulations.
Yes. Yeah, you have several different ones. You have an open space requirement in the bylaw, 50% minimum, and only 50% of that wetlands, but you have takeout easements in wetlands, so we meet that requirement. You have another one in the overlay district, the 135 overlay district, that's a little different, and it takes out wetlands and setbacks, strangely. But then you run the math and it meets, just because there is so much land and so much open space. But yes, we did check those.
And then the last comment is the dead ends. They're not cul-de-sacs, they are dead ends. How many dead ends were there?
Well, we really have, I mean, there's sort of 2 dead ends. This one you come in and you can make a full loop.
Yeah.
This one you come in and you can make a full loop at the end. So we talked to the fire department. We made at 800 feet back, this radius is a 90-foot one, so they could get their full fire truck around it, so they were comfortable with that.
They were happy with that?
Yep, so these 2 are full turnaround at the end. These 2 are both dead ends. So again, in this case, we made this so as they pulled in here, back into this, and then make that turn, and the same thing at the end of this. They come up here, they can pull up to here, back into this. So it's a T designed for a fire department to use, and they were acceptable with that. We showed them the calculations. So it
Yeah,
works
another
here, works here, works here. These are both turnaround.
Okay,
So this one, same thing, you can pull up here, back into this, and make that turn with a full fire truck.
so there's actually 5 dead ends altogether.
Yep. The one thing I should note is, again, we were trying, the 136 overlay bylaw suggests trying to, use low impact development, keep things green, more permeable, so forth. So in this driveway, we don't really need all this driveway, but it allows us to have all the yards backing up to this open space area. So what we did in this end, you'll see this is colored green up here at this end. So what we wanted to try and do is make this so that it's paved road to here. This could be a grass paver, if you're familiar with that, an improved grass so that fire trucks can drive over it.
Okay.
But there's no reason to make all this pavement, so we made that green space, and that's paved. So you'd come up here to your house and go out that way, come up to these houses, go out that way. Fire truck can do the whole loop. Did the same thing down here in this corner, so as you come down here, truck could come up here, but this could be reinforced grass as well. So if you back onto what looks like a lawn, come up here and go back out.
Okay.
And he's seen that design before and was comfortable with it.
I'm done.
Thanks. Kyle?
I personally love the architecture. Just something that I like in architecture is this kind of housing. Kind of sad it's age restricted, but
You'll get there.
I'll get there one day.
You're gonna catch up.
But yeah, I like it.
How does that work, age restriction? See, what does it mean, the
Community
alphabet
care,
soup?
retirement,
Community care,
So
retirement.
at least one of the 2 people who lives,
At least one
At
in the
least
family has to be 55,
and
nobody under 18 can permanently reside in any unit.
for more than 2 weeks at a time. So your grandkids can come visit for 2 weeks at a time, then you kick them out.
So if,
And you can have a young wife or a young husband.
yeah, either one
But
of the
you-
spouses
you can't both
is
be
under
young.
55, that's fine, as long as one of you is at least 55. And you can have kids if they're
It's a
19
changing
and above.
world, okay.
My parents out there.
All right.
So it's really, it really is active adult housing, and the idea is that here's a place for people to hang out with people that are their same age, have common interests. there's a mile of bike trails between the whole thing, walking and bike trails. You can go golfing up the street, you can go shopping together, you can go to Providence in 20 minutes, you can go, so it's really,
But
you
there's
know.
definitely a consideration for an aging component too, so you could stay here longer than you could in maybe a typical home, because you've got your first floor master. Randy and I have talked about that one of the entrances should be, at least one entrance point to the home should be essentially level. So you're not going up a stair. The doorways would be handicap accessible, so they'd be wheelchair width, the doorways in the homes. And then, that was really the majority of those kind of components. So there were some thoughts put into how is it different than any other condo development?
And
those are some
55
ways.
is the age.
55.
55, that's considered old, okay.
Retirement.
Yeah, all right.
Retirement housing.
Okay, I can move in then, so, good or bad. Yeah. But I do like, I mean, obviously, it seems like a real interesting plan. I do like the idea of walking trails around the place, getting people outdoors, you know.
Yep.
Kind of ties in
Yeah.
nicely, so.
Yeah, yeah, and we'll have a list, a complete list of the amenities, because you need to provide some, and, you know, if this was assisted living, the list of amenities, a total different thing with, you know, doctors and places to, you know, get health services, but in this case, again, it's active adult housing, so, you know, we expect to have at least a bocce court, probably a dog park or two, we're gonna have the walking trails, and we're thinking maybe there's a place to have ice skating on here in the winter, and so just try and have a list of amenities. This will be maintenance taken care of by the HOA, so it'll be a professional maintenance company, will do all the plowing, mowing, lawnscape, building maintenance, those types of things, so.
Just one other question that popped up though, so if somebody buys this unit, 58 years old, lives there a few years, goes to sell it, they obviously have to sell it to someone who fits the
Correct.
same.
It would be deed restricted, yes.
Okay.
The ponds,
Mhm.
are they man-made because of the gravel, or are they actual ponds? Cause I like the water feature, that's,
Yeah, they're
that,
beautiful, but yeah, it's a very good question. I was actually, my brother did all our wetlands work and got all the wetlands approved recently, and I was asking him the same thing before tonight's meeting as I was looking at this, but we found this is old Armsby Road, so Armsby used to come like this, bump out at the cemetery and go that way. That's old Armsby. I found an old plan of Armsby Road that showed pond right here. So I believe what happened was, when this road used to be that way and they straightened it out, I think they filled part of the pond. But that plan was like back in the 50s, so I think this pond is original and what has been there for a long, long time. This one looks like it's been dug out, cause it's probably
Under
8
gravel.
feet deeper than that one, it's smaller, very steep side, so I believe this was dug out.
mhm.
This pond, I believe, is only here because there was a beaver dam right here, and water's been backed up to about a foot deep in that for years and years, so.
Okay.
That looks like it's breached now, and so the water's only probably 6 inches deep. But you see trees, more trees, red maple, swamp kind of stuff coming up in the back here. So I believe this one got dammed by the beavers. That looks dug, this is so straight it looks dug, and I think this is the real original pond, and that's the stream that took it to the north, so.
I was also gonna mention, we had, at our last meeting, for in Sutton, we have scenic roads.
Yep.
Someone who lives on Osprey Road, which goes across 146, I forgot about that, suggested that we make it a scenic, no one had ever made that, request.
Yep.
And fortunately for us, we had someone in the audience who mentioned the fact that Osprey Road, that you drive on, in Osprey Road, historically where it is, are two different things.
Yep.
So we're looking into that, and that, it just, for impact purposes, it's very interesting. Conceptually,
Yeah.
I can appreciate all the good work you put in here, so that's my 2 cents.
Thank you.
You 55? You can weigh in?
Yeah, I'm somewhat past 55.
He doesn't look it.
Couple items. One, I'm glad to hear you got a level entrance from the garage into the unit.
Mm-hmm.
I guess, I'm also on that, the Affordable Housing
Okay, yeah.
Commission and also the Council of Aging.
Yep.
And this is very important. As people get older, they don't have the mobility. It becomes a big problem.
Yeah, I mean, I think you were talking more from like at least one entrance into the house, and what
Yeah.
what the architects tell me we need to do on this is when you drive into the garage, there needs to be a 6-inch lip to get into the house
Okay.
for building code, mass building code. In case, you know, water tank or something breaks out in the garage, it can't go in the house.
Gasoline,
So
Yeah.
that's what he's told me, it'd be 6-inch, which again, if you had to ramp that, it's not much of a ramp. And then, in all the other cases, like on the buildings I showed you, you know, from the garage, it's sort of certainly the long length, it's the longest distance to the front door, and this is only a 6-inch jump here. So again, if you ever had to ramp that,
It's
very, very easy
easy,
on that length.
yeah.
But-
So it's 6-inch, not flat.
Right,
Yeah.
correct.
So,
I'm gonna try to get that down to 3 somewhere.
Yeah, well, I mean, if we can go further, I'm okay, but he just said building code wise, I don't think there's a way around it, but we're happy to
Mhm.
sniff around it.
it seems to me, just listening to the general public here in this particular area, a lot of people with somewhat larger homes, that this whole concept might fit what they're looking for, especially somebody to take care of all the outside activity.
Yep,
You know, as the excuse me. So I think that's a good idea. My other question is, if there's 88 units, how many of these have you planned to be affordable?
There would be 10% affordable is the minimum requirement, so that would be 9 units.
9 units, okay.
And so we've already been, Jen and I have been talking about the potential to squeeze a few more in there to help with your local numbers. And so we're thinking maybe we can sort of do a trade-off. The apartments are hard, you know, in this condition where you have to spend the money to build 9 apartments, and you only get that back at $1,800 a month or whatever the number is over 20 years. So if those, maybe some of those could become affordable, and the others maybe are just single bedroom for sale units, that, you know, maybe there's something that makes sense there. So we're happy to try and figure out a way that is most.
You know, I think it would be worthwhile to pursue that level of activity.
Yep, thank you.
Yeah, so as a condominium association, this is, they're owning and maintaining the road as well,
Yes, correct. This will all be private streets
All
maintained by
private.
the project, by the,
all the grounds, everything.
everything, landscape, everything.
And so this bylaw allows other facilities for continuing care, you're not considering anything like that? There's no other amenities other than
Correct.
the outdoor things
The
and
bylaw allows assisted living and other, you know, types of continued care. But in this case, we're doing independent living. So
Okay.
all these units are designed as independent living units, you know, essentially active adult. And so I sort of gave you the outline of the approximate palette of kind of the things that we would be providing.
And the water's being provided, you have a commitment letter from,
Wilkinsville Water, yes.
you do have that, okay.
Subject just to getting all of our other permits.
Subject to,
Yes.
okay.
It's gotta be first in line. Only there is no line right now, so he's good.
When you build, now you're on the line, right?
Well,
That's how
when
that
he
works
gets
with
his
them?
permits from us,
Yeah.
No, our
They-
permits-
then
will-
he can get
Not
queue in the line.
Oh, I see.
They'll issue, but they will issue it.
They're already issued.
Good.
Us.
Been times they could.
Good.
They've made some recent corrections to some issues they had with water flows, and so they've improved things, so they know they have capacity. So all they can say is that we have enough capacity based on the project. Once you're fully permitted, come back and make the actual application, and we will supply you water. So that's all we can do and get until we are permitted.
Very good. No, I think it's a good concept.
Thank you.
Yeah, I love the idea of having paths and recreation right there. And it's a good fit, I think, for the area as well. Love the idea of it being sort of a Cape Cod, sort of New England-y feel to it. Yeah, it's good.
That's all of us.
Okay.
We only have one person in the, well, we have 2 people in the audience. Any comments from
You guys can
the
comment on
audience?
The only thing I would say is that you're gonna put residential housing on 146 at an area where they're accelerating up to 70 miles an hour. I think the noise factor is something that you're gonna have to do something to
Mhm.
attenuate.
Yeah, we've looked into that. I mean, one of the beauties is that 146, the speeding cars are out here heading south. once you slow down a little bit to even take this ramp, cars are definitely going slower. But you can see the dense evergreens, mostly white pines right here on this side of 146. We're not cutting through that at all. And our units that are gonna be right here, they're 20 feet tall, or 24 feet tall. So these trees are much taller than the homes that we have. So we have a natural buffer that's there that we're gonna keep there, we're not changing it. So we have a pretty good buffer. This side's not as good. The sign right there, you can see, that's the Pleasant Valley sign. So we're gonna bring the evergreens back along this area to screen those. But as part of the Route 146 overlay district, we have to do a visual, view of this for you to look at. So we've got pictures of 146 in both directions and some graphics that we've done to show you how the buildings would view, but you really don't see anything because the buildings, we kept them short on purpose, so they're only 24 feet.
I live 2 miles away, and I can hear the traffic every day. Outside of I go out my door, I can hear it. So,
Yep.
those people are gonna really.
Really good.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but they're old.
They're old.
They can't hear.
Put that in the deed that they have to.
I think I had probably about the same distance, and I'm up early at sunrise, and I'm always amazed at how much I can hear. How many people are already up? I think I'm the only guy up at 5:30 in the morning, but there's a whole bunch of people out on the highway, you're right.
The traffic starts early, so yeah, it's definitely an impact here, so, it's just not much we can do about it. We really felt like this is a better use for residential, it's a residential street, rather than trying to bring
It's a bold
business
concept.
onto this.
No, it's a bold concept.
No children in the school system.
Yeah.
Any other questions for us?
I don't think so. I mean, I've been talking to Jen since day one. It's been months now, it seems, that we've started talking about it, but there's obviously some different terminology that you have in your bylaw. So it's a CCRC bylaw, but one of the sections says buildings need to be 75 feet apart. That's very rare for senior housing to keep the buildings spread that far apart. Usually you wanna put them closer together so people are near their neighbors. So that's part of your current bylaw, so that's something that we would be asking a waiver for. And again, with the townhouse style, if these were each 75 feet apart, we couldn't make the plot work at all. And I think the other big waiver, there's a couple spots where, to bend the road around certain areas and make this, these, garden areas, these little garden plots. In this area particularly, and I think maybe one unit here and one unit out in the street, we're closer than the 70 feet to a side or front lot line. So that's another waiver that we'd be asking for. So those are the only, I think, two major kind of waivers. I think we generally meet the subdivision regs, but we're probably, obviously longer than your typical dead end, but tried to make turnarounds and make sure the fire department can turn around. So we'll have a list of waivers, but those are things hopefully can work with us on as long as we can prove that they make sense.
Recently, with Pleasant Valley, in their expansion with condominiums, I'd encourage you to somehow reach out to your abutters, as
Yep.
opposed to meeting them here
Yep.
at a meeting, and then we ask you to go.
Yep.
Just so they're
Yeah.
all aware of
Yep.
of the fact, and I'd encourage any board members. I do remember going to the only time I've been on the site was that previous time, but to drive on the street and go in and actually see, for me anyways, I need to visualize and stuff.
Yep.
But if you only have 10 abutters, or if you only have a few neighbors, I'd encourage you to reach
Yeah.
out to them
Yeah,
informally.
Yes, yep, no, I've started doing that, it's part of the 136 overlay that we need to notify people.
Mhm.
Talk to Jen, that what we probably do is just rent a room at the golf course and invite everybody over there, and whether we
Yep.
do, the direct abutters or maybe a little bigger, but towards that end, I met with Sandy Loomis last week just to chill, cause she's the closest one, we're
Right.
surrounding her on all four sides, basically. So I met with
She's
her. and
invested.
She
Yeah.
likes the idea, obviously, because there's a whole bunch of new people that could visit her bookstore.
Sure.
And they've started doing some adult type of things, with the authors coming in and other things like that, and bring your grandkids day, so that kind of thing. So there'd be opportunities. We talked about extending the trail from that rest stop here, right along the street, right to her project as well, so doing those kinds of things. So, so I've met with her, I've met with, John Burns at Blackbrook, and we've spoken to, Bob Haddon, I think it is, that is the management company, just so we can tell them what we're doing and make sure they're up to speed. And really the next step is to figure out what's the best way to invite these people. But we definitely will do that, and that will happen well before the public hearing.
Thanks for coming in.
All right, well, thank you for
When do we
your time.
see you again? What happens?
We were gonna we need to file by the 27th of this month, I believe, to have a hearing around the 25th of March.
Okay.
So that would be the next time.
One more question, man.
Yes.
What do you think the asking price is he's gonna be?
Oh, that's the hardest question. Do you wanna go there yet?
As high as
I know it's
possible.
not 20,000, and I know it's not 500,000.
No, I know, there's a lot that goes into it, but we're really thinking, like 415,000, somewhere around there probably. And again, that's gonna depend on if you are doing a second bedroom and finishing any of that space, doing a basement, other things, so there's a lot, but, I think for the 2-bedroom unit, I think that's around the number. That's sort of based on the square footage that the villas projects are selling for, and they're 2,800 square feet, so they're much bigger, and when you add in the basement, some of those are 5,000 square feet. So we're trying to stay much smaller, but I think somewhere, in the high 3s to the low 4s, I think is probably where it will end up. But we're having the cost run now on the road as we've designed it, but as we go through the board, if things change or something gets bigger, longer, wider, something, then that backs into that, which affects the price, so. But I think high 3s to low 4s.
Good question, Bill.
The affordable units would be set by HUD.
Yep.
The Leland Hill Estates are single family, 2 to 3 bedrooms, and the HUD rate on those is, I think, 205 right now, so.
And how do they do the HUD rate again, Jen?
80% of the mean annual income for this region.
Yep. So it's those
80%.
making 80% of the median income, affordable to those making 80% of the median income or less. So, and they always, of course, for the developers, they'll set the top end of that, so 205 is the current, what the affordable units at Leland Hill are selling for. So you're talking the same number, it's the same number for any project within the town.
What's the region?
The region,
Central
Southern
Mass,
Worcester County. Southern Worcester County.
Southern Worcester County, yeah.
Yeah, so the affordables would be a significant savings if you qualify.
Thanks for coming in.
Okay, thank you, appreciate the time.
Thank you.
And they have to look identical on the outside. It's the interior of the units where the finishes change.
You got a report for
for
us?
the affordables.
look like the,
Yeah, the finishes, so. The hardwood we have, the outside has to look the same.
So the last item on the agenda that we skipped over
Was Wally.
was a report for the new board members, CMRPC, which is the Central Mass Regional Planning Commission that meets monthly? No, quarterly.
It's at least quarterly.
Quarterly, and we always.
Extra meetings as
We
they
appoint
occur.
a member of our board, to attend them, and Wally likes going, so we keep sending him.
Thank you, good night.
And we get money from,
Yeah.
because he
Hours.
goes, we get credit, we get hours from the Regional Planning Commission, so, and anyone else can go if you're interested, I'm sure.
Right, and if extra members go, we get extra hours.
We get extra hours.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, so we get local planning assistance hours, so we get 12 every year automatically, where basically we can have other planners like me, or traffic engineers, whoever's on staff at CMRPC, do projects for us. We pay an assessment every year based on our population to be a member of Central Mass Regional Planning. But then we get them to do these projects that we want them to do. Often, their mapping guy, cause I do GIS mapping in my office, and don't do it every day, so I often need pointers, so often I can just reach out, call the mapping guy, and he'll help me, and none of that ever gets subtracted from the LPAs unless he's doing a project for me. So, bouncing things off them on zoning definitions, things like that, they're there for that too, and that does not come out of LPA hours. They're really here to service all their member communities, everyday questions, and then LPA hours can go towards specific projects. So it's kinda cool. So, like Wally said, they have quarterly meetings and they have an annual meeting, but they always have specialized meetings kind of in the interim. And you can sit on different groups on CMRPC, like their transportation committee, if you're interested in that, or economic development. You can sit on different committees too and go to even more meetings. So, but Wally, the last one you went to was a special meeting, I think, right?
It's economic development.
Okay.
And it was on the 10th of January at the, I call it the new Blackstone Historical Museum. Which is up in
Visitor Center.
Quincy,
Yep.
which is a very nice facility. And if anybody has some time, it certainly is worthwhile to go up there. The whole key of this meeting was on economic development, both for, we'll say, southern Worcester County. We're in the southeastern section. I think there are 18 communities in this our area here. And I was quite taken with the fact that there's so much information out there that we're, we'll say, basically unaware of, or we don't have the expertise to be able to sort through it all and make anything out of it. But it is there. There was an individual from Southborough, and they'd just gone through a real survey, and he made a couple of points. One of which is that we're currently in a global competitive situation. He says no longer are we worrying about getting a restaurant from Framingham. You know, he said we did a survey of the town, and they couldn't believe how many international companies had a presence in Southborough. I'm just picking that as an example. We could probably have the same type of thing here. Maybe Atlas, just to
Atlas
pick on.
and Prime Metals are both
And Prime
international.
Metals is another one. It just as a thing. So that's one thing. The biggest recommendation I came out of, for me personally, out of this meeting, was the fact that they strongly recommended that each community have an economic development commission, or committee, or whatever. And I'm unaware if we actually have one.
We used
I
to.
think it's something we might want to consider and pursue. I know Jen does yeoman's work on this, but, I mean, she's one individual. She does everything from economic development to recreation to planning to zoning. I mean, so that might be something as a board we might want to pursue. I don't know, just throwing it out there. And if we do that, then there are people there at the CMRP that understand how to weed through all this information, and we could use it to our best advantage.
My experience from attending CMRC meetings too is also that projects that involve more than just your town, but your neighbors, or a couple neighbors, tend to get funded first. There's
Regional.
only so much money out there, and when you ask for it, and it's just it's just you, they're always polite and they accept the application. But when you look at what gets funded, it's usually the things that involve neighboring towns because it becomes regional. So, you know, you wanna,
Because it's a regional operation.
you wanna have a
It's a regional,
chance.
right,
So
yeah.
an economic committee that's sat in Sutton is a neat idea, but it probably a wasted night. But if you had
Except the
something.
fact that they do have, numerous communities already have them. So they tend to,
Oh,
if
yeah,
they've
yeah, yeah.
already got them, the
And that could be
nucleus
a
is there, they just,
yeah.
you know, they can
Yeah, because you have to have that
give
kind
us
of,
our framework.
I shouldn't say you have to, but it's helpful to have that group who's kind of breaking down Sutton's data and kind of what Sutton is attractive to. Remember when I first got here 20 years ago in March, 17th, March 17th is my 20-year anniversary, thank you. So when I first got here, we did a project with Millbury, where we got mass development funding, and we did a development study for an industrial park where Burnap Industrial Park is, kind of crossing the line there, kind of remaking that park. And part of that was having RKG Associates do a market study. And they basically said, Sutton's not good for anything but distribution businesses, because the highway and the location, and all you'll ever be good for is distribution. But when you have an EDC, with the help of the regional planning agency, you know, they can kind of get an updated market study done by a professional and kind of track it over time, kind of work with the planning board to adjust bylaws to kind of capture the market, or kind of work with the planning board to kind of shift the market, so you're not just the transportation capital of the planet. If you want to be something else, and there's a possibility, they can help you work to kind of shape what it is you want to be. And now some things you're never going to be. This is never going to be, you know, the international office capital of the planet. But, you know, you can really, the EDC can work with local factors and local stats, and then it's when you have an EDC that has that information at their hands, at their fingertips, then it's easier to kind of pair with communities. Other communities make grant applications, both individual and regionally, you know, because you're working with the EDC in the next community over, with the next community over. So it's just a way of having a group that's tied in locally and kind of keeps track of those local stats. And
20 years ago, or I guess sitting here tonight, there's something in the works right now that's gonna be happening 20 years from now. 20 years ago, no one ever dreamed there'd be a Blackstone Mall.
Right.
There'd be a 146 connection to the Mass Pike, so that's where we need to, that's where you find out about the stuff that's in the hopper, and it's time to attach our boat to it, and make sure we're in the loop, you
Right.
know. And that's the only place where you find out about stuff like that.
yeah, I mean, there's interesting little initiatives, like we're back on in a very different way, back on the Blackstone River Bikeway again.
Oh, really?
Which-
Wow.
Yes, so if you want in, let me know, because we
Where the money is.
actually, we're supposed to start meeting again this Wednesday at the Visitor Center, which Route 146 North, which one do you get off of? You get off at the Walmart, the first exit, go up and then loop around,
Yeah,
right?
you get off,
Providence Street.
Huh?
Yeah.
the one sign says to Holy Cross.
Okay,
That's the one you get off.
so it's a pretty awesome new facility, but we'll be, yeah, it's open and it's cool. But, Bob can give you a lot more information on what's right there, the mouth of the canal, and there's all kinds of cool stuff
And
right
the
there.
funding's gonna be there. The bikes, I mean, I find
Right,
myself,
so
I see all
we're
these pictures of people's on bike, I
reinvigorating.
don't see anyone on a bicycle. They say, well, guess what? The money's with the bikes, so.
Right, so we're
You don't have to ride a
reinvigorating
bike.
that, kind
That's
of
where you-
approaching it from a different angle. We've got rid of, I shouldn't say we got rid of, some of the people who weren't very helpful at different levels, have moved on. So we've got, you know, a group we really think we can work with. So we were supposed to start meeting again this Wednesday. We actually had a meeting last month that I couldn't attend. But they're gonna push it, abundance of caution because of the storm. So, I'll get the new date soon. But basically, we're gonna be looking at that, and that kind of is the kind of thing that can tie into economic development. Cause it's amenities like that that help drive a different kind of economic development. And
This
what we're trying
development
to
here.
do here is
People.
really kind of tap into all the different kinds of economic development that you can possibly work with. Not just a grocery store on the highway or a, you know, and an EDC could kind of lend somebody to that committee or whatever, so we have those ties.
One thing we saw a couple of years ago when Amazon came out with they're gonna move, you know, their major headquarters, a group of us did get together down in Uxbridge, and we did have a meeting. You know, of course, we didn't think Worcester was large enough to qualify to support that kind of an infrastructure, or, you know, have all the parts and pieces. But one of the things that did come together is that, okay, we're here, Northbridge is there, Uxbridge is some other place, you put Douglas in there. And maybe if we had more continuing conversations and knowing, you know, all the communities could get advantage out of getting something of maybe a little larger scale that fit the, I call it the needs and requirements of the Blackstone Valley. Meaning not some humongous thing that came from Mars or something, you know.
Yep.
So just a thought.
Well, thank you, Wally. I'd love to hear a motion to adjourn at
So moved.
9:40. I can do better.